A note for members explaining the proceedings was published 4 weeks ago. In a moment, I will call the candidates to address the House in the order in which I drew their names by lot earlier this morning. The order of speaking was published earlier today. When all candidates have addressed the House, we will proceed to the first ballot. Margaret Beckett.
Mr. Williams, when the House was first broadcast, Mike Yarwood, the political impersonator, asked for his reaction, said, "I hope I never have to face an audience like that." And I'm very conscious today of facing an electorate.
I just want to get in those tiny gaps, Anna.
As well as we do, and our weaknesses rather better. One of mine is a deep reluctance to answer only yes or no to a question I think calls for a more thoughtful response. So, as I have made clear, I do not have any problem with electing those to chair select committees, but I would like us to give thought to whether and how we could take account of opinion among select committee members themselves. I have no objection, in fact, to any of the ideas for change and reform which are being floated. But I have had experience of making reforms in this House, setting up Westminster Hall, allowing for a TV point in Central Lobby or tape recorders in the Press Gallery, all of them controversial in their day. There is rarely only one view. In fact, you're lucky if there aren't 600. It is the House who must decide, and a way must be found to take the House with you. The Speaker cannot and should not attempt to drive the House, but nor should he or she be an obstacle. And I pledge myself, if elected, to facilitate desired change. Today we face unprecedented and uniquely difficult circumstances, a two-way crisis of confidence. The public has lost confidence in us, and the confidence of many members has been shaken or even lost. No one person can resolve these problems. The challenge is one the House as a whole must address. But it's just the start for the next Speaker. Independent financial regulation would be opposed, I think, by few. But the devil will be in the detail. There is good reason why our forebears fought for and guarded the freedoms of this House. A different relationship with the upper house, should that be agreed, would certainly require delicate and careful handling from the Speaker. And while I've never predicted the outcome of a general election and don't intend to start now, many political commentators predict a hung Parliament or something close to it. New, smaller parties may be elected, even others without party, to sit alongside the honourable member for Wyre Forest. Having watched admiringly Speaker Selwyn Lloyd handle just such a House, I recognise how delicate and how potentially controversial the Speaker's role becomes. The Speaker must be seen to be fair-minded, even-handed, able to command a degree of consent and confidence across the House. I've been asked particularly to address three issues about my own candidacy: my attitude to reform, with which I've already dealt, whether it is the opposition's turn, and my own background and experience. Last time, I myself advocated the notion that it was the opposition's turn for the chair, and was corrected by political historians, pointing out that the Speakership has in fact always gone with the majority party of the day, except once. Speaker Boothroyd was that one exception. And I couldn't help noticing that on this occasion, as so often, the honourable member for Aldridge Brownhills demonstrated his independence and voted for rather than against her. And that brings me to my own record. I have extensive experience chairing committees and conferences, including committees in this House. I have had to try and communicate obscure and complex issues in a way that illuminates them for the layperson. And I have experience of driving through needed change. I have never been afraid to speak truth to power wherever power may be found. And as those who know me well testify, I have always been my own woman, and a House of Commons woman at that. So let me assure you, with all the force at my command, that such skills as I have acquired in my years in this House would, if elected, be at the service of this House and all its members, and that I am particularly conscious of the Speaker's responsibility to backbenchers. But the greatest task that faces us all is to convey afresh to the people of our country that we come here, as we all do, to serve their interests rather than our own. I shall work to help achieve that, whatever judgment the House makes today.
Margaret Beckett is looking a little nervous. I told you, I'm sure she's glad that it's over with now. She's got it over with.
It's a pleasure to follow the Right Honourable Lady. Mr Williams, it's good to see you presiding over this new procedure for electing a Speaker, a procedure introduced because the last one took too long. Being chairman of the Standards and Privileges Committee for 8 years, a job which Robin Cook asked me to do, may not be the platform of choice from which to launch a bid for the support of one's colleagues. But perhaps more than almost any other job in the House, it calls for total impartiality and an imperative to be fair. On impartiality, I have always been in the Conservative Party, not run by the Conservative Party. On fairness, one of my concerns about recent events, with the anger from a failed expenses system exposed by the media, has been the emergence of a bidding war to be tough that risks losing sight of the basic principles of justice that this House has always defended. Mr Williams, I want to see a House of Commons that regains its self-confidence. I want a more independent House of Commons, a more effective House of Commons, a more relevant House of Commons, and a more accessible House of Commons. I want to see the terms of trade tilted away from the executive back to Parliament. And government has nothing to fear from that at all. If we raise our game, they will have to raise theirs, and the country will benefit. So what might be different? I hope our proceedings might be brisker. Shorter questions, shorter answers, shorter speeches. The heart of the chamber might beat a little faster. And I believe we can use the time of the chamber and our own time more effectively. We could trade those thinly attended opposition day debates when the whips come into the tea room and tell us about speaking opportunities for more topical statements enabling us better to hold the government to account and reconnect with the public. We could build time in the chamber around time in select committees instead of the other way round. And the time of colleagues is precious. I would pilot indicative speaking lists where relevance would have the same importance as seniority. I would like to see some select committee chairman present his or her report here in the chamber of the House of Commons, and so challenge the government monopoly on statements. That would be hugely symbolic of a chamber in which we should be joint landlords with the government and not tenants. To some of these ideas, Mr Williams, terms and conditions apply. The Speaker is more referee than player. The House must decide whether it wants to shift the balance of power. And I believe there is a window of opportunity in the remaining months of this Parliament. And in that debate, the Speaker can act as a catalyst. The Speaker should be neutral when neutrality is required. He should exercise influence when influence is required. And he should show leadership when leadership is required. And the Speaker should look outwards as well as inwards. He should speak about the House of Commons rather than for the House of Commons, and be much less detached than tradition has required. And after listening to the tributes to Michael Martin on Wednesday, I would add another quality. I think at times the Speaker should be a friend. Last year, Mr. Williams, there was a run on the banks, which lie at the heart of our prosperity. This year there has been a run on the Commons, which lies at the heart of our democracy. And in both cases, imprudent behaviour by a few, loose regulation, inadequate supervision, led to a loss of public confidence and to an anger at those in charge. There was systemic failure, and those who did no wrong were caught in the backlash and the loss of institutional reputation. In both cases, you need to address that anger and restore that confidence by changes at the top, by better regulation, by transparency, and a change of culture. We have recapitalised the banks. We now need to recapitalise the House of Commons. We have left behind the age of deference. We need to arrive at the age of earned respect. None of us can do what is needed on our own. In his resignation speech, Michael Martin said, "We are at our best when we are united." I hope I could achieve that unity, build on the resilience of the House, and help win back the confidence and trust of those we represent.
You know, George Young is a very distinguished member of Parliament and made a very splendid speech there. I like the way he talked about he's in the Conservative Party and not run by the Conservative Party. Great.
What is unique is that I propose myself as an interim Speaker rather than as a permanent or long-term appointment. And the reason I do that is that I have become convinced that what we need between now and the next election, and after the next election will be too late, what we need between now and then is the restoration of the reputation of this House with the public. And if we go into the election without that achieved, then I think the consequences for our democracy could be very considerable. And therefore we have to ask ourselves what sort of Speaker it might be who could achieve that in the time available. And I would say that we need, in these extraordinary circumstances, and in any other circumstances I wouldn't have been putting myself forward, given that I am definitely retiring at the next election. But in these extraordinary circumstances, I believe that we need somebody who is provenly capable of connecting with the general public, whom the public knows, whom the public by and large trusts, whom the public recognises and is willing to listen to. Perhaps by rather vulgar means, I believe that I have come to fit that bill. And that is why, amongst these very trusty, old, serving senators this afternoon, I put myself before you as the rather vulgar tribune. And I've been longing to say that to the benches opposite for a long time. But I think in addition to restoring Parliament's reputation with the public, and let me say I don't believe that that means that the Speaker has to be appearing in television studios up and down the land. But I think the Speaker does have to be more visible outside this House over these next few months than has hitherto been normally associated with the role. But in addition to that function, I believe that it is crucial that the new Speaker does what he or she can, and it will be limited by the will of the House. And when I've seen some of the manifestos that have been put forth, I rather think we're trying to elect a supreme dictator this afternoon, which is rather unlikely, but with the will of the House. The new Speaker has indeed got to rebalance power from the executive to backbenchers. Now, whenever there is a speakership election, all the candidates put forward that notion. Not always is there a successful implementation, but I would say that I have not come late to that view, but have in fact stood by it throughout my 22 years in this House. Under the Conservative administration, I actually teamed up with the Honourable Member for Bolsover when we opposed... when we opposed, though unsuccessfully, a raft of measures which reduced backbench rights, including the removal of our right, which I had in fact on one previous occasion exercised, to put down business motions in front of the House. That was just the first of a long series of measures which have taken away power from backbenchers and concentrated them very heavily on the executive of whatever party it may be. And under this administration, I actually led a sit-in. The Honourable Member for Blackburn used to do sit-ins in his youth. I came to them in middle age. But I was actually so moved to do because the government was bringing a bill out of committee, half of which had not even been examined. And I believe that one of the consequences of the concentration of power on the front bench is that what has happened is that out there and in here, we are being governed by increasing tranches of legislation which have never been examined by Parliament, let alone voted on by Parliament. That has to be wrong. And I think it an urgent task of the Speaker to try and persuade people outside that we are not irrelevant and that we have a real function to perform. And I believe that it is important that whoever is Speaker will not only help to clean up the mess, but will be seen to do so, but will in doing so bear one thing in mind, that no matter how much we may tighten the system, and no matter how much we may come down on those who have erred, we should always put it as a core principle that people of modest means should not be deterred from entering this House. And if we fail to do that, I do not think it is grandiose to say that we will have failed democracy. And I have been up and down the broadcast media for the last several weeks before I even thought of putting in a bid for this post, defending the principle that we do have to have adequate remuneration and assistance if people of all means and very few means are able to enter this place. Mr. Williams, I am very honoured indeed that enough people have asked me and have indicated support for me to feel able to stand here and say what I have said this afternoon. Whoever is the Speaker must have broad support on both sides of this House and in all parties, or it will not be a Speaker who starts with the goodwill of the House of Commons. I believe that I have broad-based support. How much is yet to be seen.
Anne Widdecombe, a woman with a great sense of humour, and she's made a strength of her retirement at the next election, saying, I'm only with you for a year, but I'll do whatever I can, and she's got ideas about it all.
But also because of the work that you do to promote the work and independence of select committees. And you developed the questioning of the Prime Minister in the Liaison Committee, which is an effective investigative process, rather than the shouting match that we so often get at Prime Minister's questions. You will recall that, as the Honourable Member for Hampshire pointed out, the last time we elected a Speaker, and several of us were candidates then, it took an awful long time, so long that the Right Honourable Member for Derby South rose from the government front bench to move the adjournment of the House at 25 minutes to midnight. Well, however long it takes us today, and I hope it's not that long, today's decision is unusually important. Are we going to respond to public anger and dissatisfaction by setting out a process of making Parliament more effective, Or are we going to announce tonight that it's business as usual? We'll make a big mistake if that's all that we say. Now, clearly, the new Speaker must help to make certain that there can be no repeat of the expenses disaster, because pay and expenses will be determined by an independent outside body. I believe that there is now general agreement on that. We need a system which is not wide open to abuse, which recognises that the public wants us to be more economical in what we do. And at the other extreme, I don't really want to spend any more Saturday mornings explaining to a national newspaper why the constituency office toilet had to be repaired before a member of my staff felt obliged to explain in more detail why this was necessary. But we can't stop with the expenses. The next source of public anger could be the disastrous impact of clauses in legislation which, because of rigid timetabling, the House hasn't properly examined. The House needs to take control of how it uses its time. The government is entitled to bring forward a programme and to carry through the commitments on which it was elected. But it's not the government's job to dictate how scrutiny of that programme is carried out. A business committee which doesn't have a government majority, I think, is the increasingly accepted means of achieving that, and I would seek to argue for it. We need to build on the strengths of the House, so the select committee system should be strengthened and made more independent. Backbench members and minorities need rights to bring important issues to votes and to inquiries. And the authority of the new Speaker should be used to rebalance Prime Minister's questions in favour of backbenchers and to help move the House towards a more constructive and less aggressive style. The aggressive style puts off many women, puts off quite a lot of men, and puts off a lot of the public. It's actually not what happens a great deal of the time in the House of Commons, but it's the parts that the public mainly see. The administrative structure over which the Speaker presides, and a lot of the job is below the waterline, that needs to open up the Commons more to the public and to make it a more family-friendly and diversity-welcoming place. I'd like to see more younger and newer members involved in bodies like the House of Commons Commission. The Speaker's authority must be used to assert the independence of the House from the Executive and to protect the public. I took a privileges case against the previous Lord Chancellor over the dismissal of an agency board member who'd given evidence to a select committee against the wishes of the board, and that was given as grounds for dismissal. I also think it's important that the Speaker should have a real care and concern for members, their staff, and the staff of the House, as Speaker Martin clearly did. And I'd like to go further in reducing the isolation of the Speaker, both inside this House and outside it. There is a role for the Speaker within limits in speaking for the House and on its behalf to the public. The Speaker needs to be someone who maintains the momentum for reform and doesn't act as a barrier to it. That's the kind of job I want to do. It needs to be done by someone who is firm, fair, and generally accepted. It's not enough to win the vote. The Speaker needs to be someone who is also accepted by those whose preferred candidate is not elected. The new Speaker and the House need a consensus decision rather than a mere majority. I like to think that I can fulfil that requirement, and my commitment to making Parliament effective has run right through my political life. But the decision is in the hands of honourable and right honourable members.
That was Alan Beith, a Liberal Democrat. I don't understand his point about the Speaker being isolated. You don't have to be isolated to be Speaker. I was never isolated as Speaker. I had as much company as I ever wanted.
Get off to a good start. Others suffer setbacks. One of my first approaches was to a particularly distinguished colleague whom I wouldn't dream of identifying. I asked if he'd back me today. "Certainly not, Bercow. You're not just too young, you're far too young. Given that in my judgment, the Speaker ought to be virtually senile." If you were elected, it would be disastrous for you, disastrous for the House, and disastrous for the country. And with that, he slammed down the phone. Just in case this is a widely held view, I shall merely observe, Mr. Williams, that speakers elected younger than me at 46 were actually quite common in times gone by. In the 18th century, Speaker Grenville was elected at 29 and Speaker Addington at 32. Indeed, both went on to become Prime Minister. Not a likely career move in my case. By contrast, Speaker Onslow was elected at 36 in 1728, and he stayed in situ for more than 30 years. Not a danger in my case, given my commitment to serve no longer than 9 years in total. Even further back, Sir Thomas More was virtually my age when he became Speaker, though, frankly, his rather sticky end does not fill me with encouragement. But then again, he is the only member of this House ever to have been canonised. My own preference is, however, for success in this world rather than in the next. I do not want to be someone, I want to do something. Working with colleagues, I want to implement an agenda for reform, for renewal, for revitalisation, and for the reassertion of the core values of this great institution in the context of the 21st century. That this election is being held at this moment testifies to the turmoil which is engulfing this place and to the crisis of confidence in parliamentarians themselves. Unless and until we can move the debate on from sleaze and second homes to the future of this House, we shall remain in deep trouble. A legislature cannot be effective while suffering from public scorn. So a strong command of Erskine May is far from adequate for the task, so I'm confident that 4 years' service on the Speaker's panel of chairmen has equipped me to cope with our over-mysterious procedures. There are 3 core reasons for offering myself today as Speaker, and I'm pleased to be supported in this by parliamentary colleagues from no fewer than 6 political parties: Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats, Scottish Nationalists, Welsh Nationalists, SDLP, as well as enjoying support from independents of both right and left. First, I'd implement radical reforms to the system of allowances, but I would do so with respect and reverence for Parliament itself. This House is neither corrupt nor crooked, but what was meant to be a straightforward system of compensation for members has become immensely complicated, mired in secrecy, and short on accountability. Clearly, Sir Christopher Kelly's recommendations must be accepted unless they are manifestly inappropriate, which, frankly, I don't expect to be the case. The next Speaker must ensure that honourable members and taxpayers alike aren't treated unfairly. This is a difficult balance to strike, but it is one that I can both accomplish and communicate. Secondly, the case for strengthening backbenchers to revive Parliament as a whole is incontrovertible. The true story of the past 30 to 50 years is not one, frankly, of petty claims on the one hand and extravagant claims on the other, but rather of the relentless erosion of this chamber's former strength. The Prime Minister recently asserted his desire to restore authority to Parliament, and if elected, I would seek to hold him and any successor to that pledge. This House must seize back control of its own core functions by, amongst other changes, a business committee which it really runs, urgent questions more readily granted, and enhanced scrutiny of budgets and legislation, both domestic and European. And once and for all, ministers must be obliged to make key policy statements here. The Speaker should always be neutral within this chamber, but he or she should not be neutral about this chamber. If elected, I would be a tireless advocate for our political relevance. So finally, I turn to the world beyond Westminster. A reforming Speaker needs to become both an advocate and an ambassador for Parliament. He must reconnect it with the society which it seeks to represent. I would be comfortable to be both a speaker and a listener. I make no apology for the views I've expressed, the causes I've championed, and the votes I've cast over the years. Some may have been incompatible with others over a period, as many colleagues have been quick to point out. But even youngish men can acquire wisdom as time goes by. In any case, that is all irrelevant to the role of the Speaker, whose own political preferences must be permanently cast aside. Throughout my 12 years in this House, I have always been passionate about Parliament. I believe that we can rebuild trust and restore our reputation, but only if we make a clean break with the past and demonstrate once again that it is an honour without equal to sit in this House. I am that clean break candidate. I can help this House to meet the challenges ahead, to meet the challenge of change. We need change permanently, and we need change now. But I can help to deliver it with you only if you give me the opportunity. I know that it's a tall order, and I'm only a little chap, but I believe that I can rise to the occasion.
A very articulate, amusing speech from John Bercow, but what was interesting was the expression on Anne Widdecombe's face when he was speaking. She was sitting right behind him, of course.
Directed towards the ambitions that we all shared when we came into this chamber. That is a profound belief in our central democratic institution. We now see it at a nada. We see that we are under pressure. The reasons are evident to everyone out there, that the secrecy in which many parts of our national life operated, having been rolled back just a little, have revealed that which has disconnected us from those who sent us here in the first place. I've always believed in opening up things. I've stood for reform of Section 2 of the old Official Secrets Act. I stood for the Whistleblowers Bill, introduced originally by the Honourable Member for the idea for Cannock. I've wanted this House to represent the very best of our nation. But what I've found, and I think we've all found in this, that we are so disconnected from the public that on the first great issue of trust, public finance, public money, and knowledge of it, we failed. And that means that collectively we are held in disregard. I believe in freedom of information. There is no way of shrugging that off. I believe it was a great, great statute that the Labour government introduced. I believe that though it seems our nemesis at the moment, it is in fact the path to redemption. A public out there expect openness. And where public money is used, whether it is in local authorities or by this institution, they have a right to know. And that I profoundly believe. There are many things, but this is a moment for, not rhetoric, if I may quote the former Prime Minister, this is a moment for action. There is no hand of history on our shoulder, but a remembrance of what this House can be, rather than what it has become. And it has become something that is less than the people we represent. We have forgotten that we are not the government. We are those sent by our constituents to hold in check those that govern us. It is often a difficult balance because we are party people by our origins. But we should never forget that the government is the government. The executive rules by royal prerogative and the creation of another apparatus. We, however, come here with the simple mandate that we will question, examine, and argue with the government. We have lost our standing orders. We used to control them. Even when I came into the House, they were in the hands of the Procedure Committee, and they were brought by the Leader of the House to the floor of the House. We now no longer have any rights as private members, except for private members' bills and the 18 opposition days, to initiate anything in this House. It went to the power of initiation, whereby ballot we could raise germane and proper questions for consideration by this nation. That's what we've given away, and in a sense, that's what we must reclaim. So I said that this is a House and this is a time for business. The re-evaluation of the standing orders is absolutely key for the reignition of the central purpose of this House. Of course, I believe in the election of chairman of committees. There are many other things that we can do. The honourable member for Stoke got together a grant from the Rowntree Foundation, and then Parliament First was his product and byproduct. And to save Parliament, all the ideas that are laid out there are the ones that we hear repeated across the floor of these houses. I believe that parties from other parts of this union should be able to speak with greater equality than they have now. I believe that also they should be called and recognised as such, because this country stands as a central gift, as an inspiration to what a parliament should have been, and we let that go. The future, the repair, our success is to be a short time in which we can give a legacy to those that follow on from them. I finally made clear in my letter to every member of this House that should I be honoured by this House to be the Speaker, I would stand down at the next election and fight an ordinary election, contested, so that at least I can have and stand here in the knowledge that I had the confidence of Aldridge Brownhills, as well as this House. Thank you, sir.
Richard Shepherd, you know, always speaks with great passion and emotion about the Parliament which he loves. He's a very courageous member.
This is, without doubt, the most important speakership election in modern times, and it's certainly the most important speech I shall ever make in my entire life. This election is not only important to us in this chamber, but it's also important to those people outside the House of Commons who, because of recent events, are watching much more closely than ever before to see what kind of Speaker we elect, to see what that Speaker is going to do to restore the badly damaged trust in our House and this chamber, which belongs not to us, but to our constituents and all the people we came here to serve. It's therefore essential that the next Speaker is someone who understands the frustrations and increasing disillusionment of backbenchers who are trying to do the best for their constituents. There is a huge amount of experience and talent on our backbenches, which I see every time I'm in the chair. We must find ways of harnessing that talent. The most important qualities in the next Speaker will be strength, experience, and the enthusiasm to embrace the changes which are so badly needed. Strength will be vital to stand up to the government when it seeks to bypass the House of Commons or simply use it for its own purposes. Strength, too, to protect the interests of backbenchers, whose contributions at the moment are so badly neglected. As someone who in his younger days, much younger days, played rugby against the South African Springboks, I'm used to coping with the roughest of confrontations and able to insist on fairness being done in the toughest of circumstances. Experience, too, will be so important. To understand how the House works now and to appreciate all that is good about it in so many ways, whilst at the same time having seen its growing faults over the years and being able to recognise the need for urgent changes. I would describe myself as a reluctant politician but an enthusiastic parliamentarian. I have never enjoyed being called a politician, but I've always been immensely proud to be a Member of Parliament. Ours is a simple chamber, where elected men and women assemble to talk about the problems and needs of their constituents and the country. If there are problems at the moment with the way we use it, that is our fault, all of us, and we must correct it. Before entering Parliament, I was an arboriculturalist. I know the value of tending and nurturing irreplaceable plants. But there is huge merit when the time is right, not to uproot, but to prune, perhaps severely, to ensure the survival and regeneration of that which is so precious. And what is precious to us all, and what is in grave danger now, is the reputation of our House of Commons, and with it, our ability to truly represent our constituents in the way we were elected to do. The Speaker is a servant of this House, and it's not for would-be speakers to prescribe in detail the changes which are now so clearly needed. But some things are now obvious and must be tackled with the greatest urgency. The vexed question of our allowances must be dealt with as speedily as possible, but must also get it right. No one believes, not even the press, that members of Parliament came to this House to make money out of their pay and allowances. But the events of recent weeks have not only made this House a sad, introspective place, more importantly, they've robbed us of the vigour and vitality to do our jobs as we all know they should be done. The boil has been lanced. The old system has gone, never to return. And clearly steps will be taken to deal with all the issues arising from the past. However, it should not be difficult to put in place a new system, completely out of our hands, which not only gives complete transparency to our affairs, not only reassures our constituents and the press, who keep a careful watch on these things, but also allows us to fight our way out of this slough of despond and stand up once again for ourselves, for our House of Commons, and for our ability to do the job we came here to do. There are some things the Speaker could do even under the existing rules. Governments of whatever party ought no longer to be allowed to make major statements in schools, hospitals or television studios before coming to this House. There is nothing in the world more irritating than to wake up in the morning and hear on the radio or to see on the television important announcements being made and discussed, and often minds being made up and positions being adopted before this chamber has had the opportunity to hear the actual statement from the minister concerned and to question him or her about it. There are ways open to the Speaker under existing rules which would enable him or her to make this practice much, much more difficult. I think everyone is now agreed the scales in which are weighed the power of the executive and the power of this House itself have tipped too far towards the executive. A committee ought to be established as soon as possible to look at how, without in any way hindering government business, the House can again take charge of those matters which rightly belong to it and which could completely revitalise its workings. The kind of things I would envisage being on the agenda would be the day-to-day management of the business of the House to allow much greater input from backbenchers, freedom for select committees to elect their chairman, also to be able to perhaps summon witnesses to give evidence on oath. The need for pre-legislative scrutiny on all bills is also, I think, now very obvious. It's an old saying, but a true one nonetheless, that out of the grave difficulties can sometimes come rare opportunities. We must now leave the vexed question of our allowances and salaries in the hands of others, put the difficulties behind us, and get on with serving our constituents as they expect and we long to do. This is a golden opportunity. The House of Commons will never be the same again. The lid has been taken off, and I, for one, am only too happy to let the fresh air in and embrace and change and look at everything we do in this House. Like others, I agree that the new Speaker must be prepared to speak publicly on behalf of the House when appropriate, in an authoritative and non-political way. I do not believe that he or she should have a constant presence in the media, but the House's position and how we work must always be carefully and clearly explained, and only the Speaker is in a position to do this. Were I to be elected, I would serve the remainder of this Parliament, and if re-elected, most of the next, before resigning to allow the election of a successor, who by that time will be known to all the members of the new Parliament. I have not sought to canvass colleagues during this election, nor have I had anyone working on my behalf. The reason for this, quite simply, is that I feel for this election, of all elections, it is inappropriate, as history itself shows. It could possibly jeopardise the new Speaker's independence, and in my case, colleagues have been able to see me perform as Deputy Speaker for many years. If it proves to be a handicap in this election, so be it. I can only do things in the way I believe to be right. Finally, can I say to this House, this is no time to vote along party lines. This is no time to vote to stop him or her. This is no time to vote because you told someone days or weeks or months ago that you will support them when the time came. This is the time, the desperately serious time, when we must all vote for the person we genuinely believe to be the best person to be the next Speaker of this House of Commons. Mr Williams, the task is huge and the demands will be great. If I were to be given the honour of becoming Speaker, I promise this House of Commons that I would dedicate the coming years of my life to making our House of Commons once again the respected and vital centre of our national life that we all so want it to be.
Sir Michael Lord, a Deputy Speaker who I worked with me for many years when I was in the chair.
Honourable friend, I have not conducted a great campaign, but I am very privileged to be able to stand before my colleagues and to offer my services based on 39 years this very week in this House of Commons, an institution that I deeply and passionately love, and which for the remaining few years of my parliamentary life, because I too would wish to retire at a similar time, honourable friend, I wish to serve. My honourable friend, the member for Buckingham, has talked of Thomas More, the only member of Parliament ever to be canonised. It is, in fact, his feast day today. And perhaps it's therefore an appropriate time when we should think how we can reclaim that confidence and trust which the nation ought to repose in this, its House of Commons. But before I get too pious, let me also remind you that it was on this day that Machiavelli died. And unless I'm accused of being Anglo-centric, it is, of course, the eve of Bannockburn. Mr. Williams, when I first came into this House, provoked by a love of parliamentary democracy, one of the first things that I did was to become, at the behest of my new Labour friend, Greville Janner, now Lord Janner, was to become the first chairman of the campaign for the release of Soviet Jewry. My activities in that regard, and subsequently during the period of perestroika, when I picked my way through the sandbags outside the Parliament building in Vilnius, and when I conducted a seminar in democracy in Bucharest, showed me two things. First of all, how right Churchill was to say that our system, for all its deficiencies, is the only true system. And secondly, it taught me how people looked up to this British House of Commons. And I want to feel that we can again become a beacon for those who are hungry for democracy. And yes, the Iron Curtain may have come down, and yes, many of the people for whom one worked in those days may now enjoy a degree of parliamentary democracy, but there is still a hunger out there. One only has to think of Zimbabwe or Iran to have that underlined. Now, there is obviously a limitation to what any speaker can do. I never forget the most immortal words ever issued in the chamber of the House of Commons by Mr. Speaker Lenthal on that January day in 1642. I have neither eyes to see. Yes, I was there. I have neither eyes to see nor mouth to speak, but as this House shall direct me, whose servant I am. An inconspicuous man, a man who rose to the occasion and who underlined in those famous words both the duty and the limitations of the Speaker. Because there are so many things that can only be done as this House directs. I would very much like to see the business of this House in the hands of a business committee with a majority from the opposition benches and with the Speaker presiding. But that can only happen if this House directs. I would like to see Select Committee chairmen elected by the same system that we're going to use later this afternoon. But that can only happen if this House directs. But there are certain things, Mr. Williams, that a new Speaker can and, in my view, should do. First of all, I would like to take a tighter grip of parliamentary questions, and may I say, in the presence of the Prime Minister and my reputable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, particularly Prime Minister's questions. Too much of Prime Minister's questions is taken up by the gladiatorial battle over those dispatch boxes. I would cut that down at a stroke. And I would like to feel, Mr. Williams, that members of Parliament had more opportunity to call the government to account by giving them more opportunity to have urgent questions and emergency debates. And I agree very much with many of the things in that regard said by my honourable friend for North Hampshire. I would also like to be very tough with ministers who spill the beans outside before coming to that dispatch box. I believe that if they do that, they should be named. And I believe that that would quickly bring them to heel. We have to have an executive that is better balanced with the legislature than we have at the moment. Perhaps there's time for a new Dunning's motion. The power of the Crown has increased, is increasing, and ought to be diminished for Crown Reed executive. We have to redress the balance. And I believe that there are things that the Speaker can do. Just as I believe that it is the duty of the Speaker to protect minority parties and minority interests. The Speaker should have no political views, but he can adopt the stance of Voltaire. I dislike what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. I know very well from my own experience in this House how much I depended upon catching Mr. Speaker Wetherell's eye when I was speaking against the hated poll tax and when I was moving amendments to try and preserve the GLC. I know how much I depended upon Madam Speaker Boothroyd allowing me to catch her eye when I was conducting an often unpopular campaign on my own side against the then government's policy in Bosnia. I know what backbenchers need from that chair. It has been very sad to see Parliament so vulnerable in recent weeks. There was a time, Mr. Williams, when members of Parliament eagerly scanned the press to see if their speeches were reported. Now they apprehensively scan the press to see if their expenses are commented on. We have got to redress that balance. I have this passionate belief in democracy. I have 4 grandchildren. I want them to feel that this is indeed the ultimate defender of their liberties and guardian of their hopes and future, because the real poor are those who have no hope. And I hope from their generation, young people will aspire to sit in this House to serve the people of this country. Mr. Williams, I submit myself to the will of the House.
Cormack, a very spirited speech, long-standing member of 39 years in the House, currently chairman of the Northern Ireland Select Committee.
Whilst it is a pleasure to follow the 8 distinguished colleagues who have already addressed the House, I have the nasty feeling that there's a certain amount of print-through in the remarks that have been made. Undoubtedly, this election is taking place in extraordinary circumstances, with greater public interest aroused, I think we as candidates should be thankful that only members of this House have the vote. To we who know what is and what is not possible, the media expectation for the new Speaker has got more unrealistic by the day. However, there can be no doubt that change is in the air. I welcome change, I've argued for change, and if chosen, I will work for change. Whilst never having seen myself for one moment as part of the establishment, I do believe that I have the necessary experience to guide the House through the current changes and those which will arise in a new Parliament. But of course, some change will come with whoever is chosen. It's the style and the personality of the new Speaker which will ensure that. Now, the House has seen me in action. I've shown that I can bring about more vitality and greater inclusivity in our proceedings. I have been known to favour brevity, and I would favour it even more on the front benches in the future. And I have shown it's possible to get to 20 questions. So I say to this House, I know the job, I believe I could do it well, and I promise not to bark too much at the Honourable Member for Corby. Without more ado, the authority of being Speaker would allow fuller use of discretion over urgent questions, over emergency debates, over the timing and length of statements. The purpose being to achieve a better match between our proceedings and the issues of the day, which are often out of sync. The Speaker, nevertheless, as we've been reminded more than once, remains the servant of the House and not its master. But we have put our Speaker into a position of greater impartiality than any other Speaker in a Parliament in the world. And I believe that we should follow the logic of that and grant the Chair more discretion in the reform of procedures. More extensive reform has to have the agreement of the House. The party leaders are all talking reform. They would find me proactive in encouraging them towards consensus. If they falter, I certainly have plenty of ideas. Yes, a business committee. Giving the House more say on the arrangement of business would help to achieve a better balance between backbenchers as a whole, on the one hand, and the elected majority. Select committees have become and are becoming an ever more important part of the scrutiny function of the House, so at the very least, the House should elect their chairman. Private members' motions should be restored, allowing a member to table a substantive motion with the expectation of a vote at the end of the debate. I believe we could copy the example of the Finance Bill, allow the opposition parties to select those parts of bills which they believe should be considered in committee of the whole House, leaving the rest to be dealt with upstairs in committee. Fridays should be altered, with set slots to allow sensible debate on private members' bills, with divisions on a deferred basis the following week. Westminster Hall is now a fixture. We could use it much more imaginatively. Heavy on our minds, however, is the subject of our allowances. I appreciate the hurt which many honourable members feel, and it makes me all the more determined to ensure that we must get this right. I would engage with Sir Christopher Kelly to encourage an integrated approach to salary and allowances. The allowances problem, and let's face it, the cost of administering it, shrinks if salary becomes a greater component of the remuneration package and the ACA a lesser. Now, without wanting to become a media turn, I believe there is a role for the Speaker in speaking up for this House. It is important to accentuate the positive. Independent research showing that, on average, members do work 70 hours a week on a regular basis on behalf of their constituents. There is genuine public interest in what our role is, and we should explain ourselves better. I will aim to be an accessible Speaker, accessible to all members from any part of the House, and I will seek regular input from colleagues on a systematic basis. Overall, my aim will be to help this House to up its game, not only in how we as members present to the public, but how we do our work on the people's behalf, and how we discharge our duties designed towards the better governance of our country. For all that has been said of late, this House remains, in my firm belief, the cradle of our democracy. This is the place to which so many people from overseas look for advice and inspiration. The outcome of today's proceedings must carry with it a determination to renew this House's reputation. And it's in that spirit and with that resolve that I submit myself to the will of the House.
Sir Alan Haselhurst, a very loyal and supportive chairman of Ways and Means with me when I was in the chair, and obviously a very hard worker for Michael Martin when Michael was Speaker.
I've been in this race now for 12 days. I've been playing catch-up because I think others probably been in it for 12 months, maybe longer, who knows. But I think the key elements for me that brought me into this in the first place was a sense of frustration. I've listened to all 9 contributions. I passionately believe, actually, that any one of the 10 of us is capable of doing the job as Speaker. But I ask myself, and I ask colleagues in this House, do we all really actually get it? Do we understand the level of crisis out there? Do we understand the level of people's anger? And I'm not sure that we do. We've seen ourselves on the front pages of national and local newspapers day in, day out, and as the main item of news bulletins day in, day out. And then 2 Sundays ago, we had the results of the European elections, which has resulted in your representatives and my representatives in the European Parliament coming from the British National Party, 2 of them. Now that, I think, should send us a very strong message indeed. And that message isn't that the British people are racists, because I don't believe they are. But what they're telling us is they are thoroughly disengaged with us. They think this place is remote and distant from them. They think we are remote and distant from them as well. So what do we do now? I mean, that's the challenge, isn't it? That's the question we're being asked today. And the easy thing to do, the safe thing to do, is to retreat to someone who is a safe pair of hands, an establishment candidate. We have no end of quality candidates with great ideas. You've heard from them today. We've had half a dozen Knights of the Realms. We've got Privy Councillors, as I said the other day, probably more gongs than you see at the Olympic Games. But are they in touch? And do they speak the language of modern Britain? Will we be thanked for our choice tomorrow? I think that's part of the question we need to ask ourselves. What I'm proposing is actually quite different to what all of the other candidates are talking about. I think we need to change the settlement between the citizen and Parliament. I think we need a more deferential Parliament. I think we need to give more power away to local people and local communities. I think that's the way we re-engage with local people. In this day and age, when the rest of the public, our constituents, are out there using Facebook, Twitter and the internet, our front benches are dictating what the topical issue for debate should be. Why? We should be allowing them to decide that through internet polls, and I think if we did, the chamber would actually be far fuller if we were actually discussing the desires of local people who have that kind of direct input into their democracy. And this place, our apparatus in Westminster Hall, time and again we have debates there. I have, you have, on local issues, issues that matter to us, and regional issues as well. Well, I would want to move the apparatus of our adjournment debates and take them out of the capital to towns, cities around the country, whether it's Gloucester or Bristol or Birmingham or Manchester. Give those areas a little bit of prestige, being part of Parliament. And actually, instead of ministers responding to debates, reading out sides of A4, I think you will find they will be responding to packed public galleries rather than one man and his dog and maybe a lobby correspondent. We would also be able to then re-engage local media, and I think it would be a good thing for those ministers to actually feel the heat of local public opinion. That's likely to change the culture of decision-making and actually, I think, lead to better decisions in the first place as well. Now, at the current rate of change, we will not in this House be representative of modern Britain at any stage in the next 100 years. I don't, I promise you, want to be a dictator. Honestly, I don't. But I think the next Speaker of this House does need to be a driver for change, someone who will cajole and try to persuade our party leaders to make this House more representative of our different classes, genders and races much, much quicker. And I can't believe in the year 2009 we're still talking about the idea of having a creche that we as members can pay for in this House. Actually, if the next Speaker, whoever he or she is, doesn't implement that within the next 12 months, frankly, I think they will have failed. We need to make fundamental changes. We need a more deferential Parliament. I think we will be stronger ultimately. We will be more respected as politicians if we actually move the pendulum of power back to local communities. Mr. Williams, in conclusion, my father has always said to me, whilst bringing me and my two older siblings up, that nobody should actually put an artificial barrier up on our hopes, our expectations, and our ambitions. I think that should be a good motto for whoever the next Speaker of this House is, actually, because I want people to aspire to be here. I want them to be ambitious, regardless of what their background is, to create a House that is more representative of modern Britain. And if we're not brave enough to make changes here, in the mother of all parliaments, then where, and after the time that we've just had, if not now, then when? The rest is up to you.
Most confident speech from a young man of 37. I like the way he's got his sleeves rolled up and got on with the job.
Thank them on behalf of the House. There are so many. They've spoken with such gravity. In a moment, I'll declare the ballot open. When I do so, members with the surnames beginning with the letters A to K should vote in the I lobby. Members with the surnames L to Z should vote in the No lobby. Please note that the side doors will be locked, so the entrance to the lobbies will be through the usual main entrance. When you enter the lobbies, much of this is obvious, but it has to be said, when you enter the lobbies, please give your name to the clerk at the appropriate desk for your surname. Surnames have been divided into 3 streams in each lobby. When you've passed the desk, you'll be given a ballot paper. When you've completed it, please place it in one of the ballot boxes at the exit of the lobby. I remind members that they should vote only for one candidate. It would be much preferred anyhow. The ballot will be open for 30 minutes. I hope to announce the result about an hour after the closure of the ballot. Sorry it's so long, but it's a secret ballot. It takes time to count. The House will be alerted by the annunciator before it is to resume. Division bells will also be rung. I now declare the ballot open, and the sitting of the chamber is now suspended. Thank you.
Well, now that's Alan Williams, the father of the House of Commons, chairing this Speaker's election. He's called the father of the House because he's the longest-serving MP. He was elected in 1964, actually, so 45 years' service. His ministerial career was quite short. He took office just before devaluation. So he took up his office. He was in one of the economic affairs ministries, and a few days later it was devaluation. He was really thrown into it then. And if we see, are we able to go back to the House of Commons now? But MPs are setting off to vote, as Alan Williams said. They've got half an hour to vote. Yes, let's stick with this as we see MPs filing off to vote, not in the normal way. They are voting in secret. We won't know how they voted. The new Speaker won't know how they voted. A to K on one side of the division lobby and the other division lobby for L to Z. It's rather like the old London telephone directories, if you can remember those. You can remember them, Betty.
I can remember them, yes. I'm that old. You don't have to remind me.
So they've never done this before. This is the first ever secret ballot in the House of Commons. Now, there are 646 MPs. They aren't all eligible to vote. We can take a few away from those. We can take a few away from those because 646 MPs, well, the 5 Sinn Féin MPs have not taken up their seats. We've got 2 vacancies, which is Michael Martin in Glasgow North East. He resigned as an MP today. And the other vacancy is Norwich North Ian Gibson, who stood down in the wake of the expenses scandal. And one other person can't vote, and it is, of course, the Father of the House himself, Alan Williams. So we've got 636 electorate. I noticed the Radio Times said that this whole thing today is rather like Britain's Got Talent. Well, it's MPs have got talent, what we're rarely seeing. And the people who are going to vote for them are their 638 colleagues. So we'll see who's got talent. This is only the first ballot. Almost certainly go through to a second ballot. But what will happen is that the last person drops off, whoever comes last. Anyone who gets less than 5% of the vote, that's 32-ish. They have to get 32 to stay in the race. And indeed, it will be open to anyone to withdraw. But what intrigues me is this secret vote we're having. Betty Boothroyd, what do you make of a secret vote for the Speaker?
I don't mind at all. It is the first time there has been a secret ballot. But I quite, on the whole, like members to stand up and be counted, if you know what I mean. Let me just tell you something, Daniel. I never looked at the Hansard to see who would voted for me when I was elected Speaker. I promise you that. It was on my desk in Speaker's office, and I looked a year later. I opened a bottle of champagne, I brought the stuff in, and I looked to see who voted for me and who voted against me, but it took a year to do it.
But you approve of a secret vote this time?
I don't mind. I think it's a good idea. I think it's quite a good idea. That the whips can then have, you know, all this business about the whips having influence. It's a load of tosh, actually, because you can say to a whip, yes, of course, I'm going to vote that way. Go and do what you want when the time comes.
But of course, now, how about this then? In future votes, on policy, on bills, how about secret votes? Because that would take away the power of the whips.
That would take away the power of democracy. That would take away... No, this is what our system is based on, of members letting it be known to their constituents in the country the way they have voted on important policy matters. I don't go along with that one jot at all, no. They've got to be counted. They've got to stand up and be counted on those issues.
Right. Now, you gave us some pithy comments after each speaker, but not too long. What did you make of that whole process, the speeches they gave?
I thought they were good speeches on the whole. I really did. I was very interested in them. You know, sometimes I sat in that chair and the House knew when I got a little bit bored because I would yawn. I didn't yawn at all today. They were really riveting speeches. I enjoyed them all.
And which did you enjoy most?
Oh, that's a secret. I'm not telling you that.
Interesting, there's only one person who's really been in a cabinet, Margaret Beckett. She was actually acting leader of the Labour Party.
That's right, yes.
In 1994.
Yes, yes.
When you were Speaker?
Yes, it was. Well,
yes,
certainly, because it was after the death of... Yes.
After the death of John Smith.
John Smith.
So someone who's been at the very top of politics,
yes,
in the cabinet all the way from 1997 through till the end of Tony Blair, a brief break and then brought back again by the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, left office again 2 weeks ago. Someone always at the heart of government. Is that a kind of person who can be Speaker?
Yes, it is. Certainly it is, because, of course, Margaret Beckett has been a backbencher, of course, when she came in at first.
Not very much.
Well, not for long. But I don't hold it against an individual because they have been in government. I mean, it's always... the reputation is, oh, the Speaker should represent the backbenchers, should come from the backbenchers. Many Speakers have been Cabinet Ministers. I wouldn't hold it against any individual. She's got a great deal of experience.
You rather liked Miss Dhanda at the end there. You thought he was impressive.
I thought that young man was splendid. I've never worked with him in the House, you see. I knew all the rest of them. I'd worked with all the rest of the candidates. But that young man I didn't know. And I thought, wonderful. Have a go. Go for gold. Whether you win or not, it's a wonderful opportunity.
Now, what about the war horses? Well, let me see. You had Alan Haselhurst, your deputy.
Alan, and also Sir Michael Lord. And, of course, Patrick Cormack and...
Well, two old war horses, Patrick Cormack, if that's not rude to call them that, Patrick Cormack and Richard Shepherd. Two people who are passionate about the House of Commons.
Absolutely, yes. But they are passionate. But most people who have been in for years and have held, worked hard in the House in one capacity or another, and I don't necessarily mean ministerial capacity, but have done work in the House on various all-party groups, history of Parliament, Trust and all those things, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, they're passionate about the House, and it's right they should be.
Sir George Young was runner-up last time.
Yes,
to Speaker Martin.
Yes.
He got quite close. He's in it again.
It's good that they have another go, isn't it?
Well, quite a lot of them had a go, actually. 6 out of the 10 are retreads, if we can call them that.
No, we can't, no, take that back.
Well, whatever we call them, they certainly did it last time.
Yeah.
John Bercow didn't do it
last
time. So John Bercow hasn't, and Widdecombe hasn't. What about this idea of only being Speaker till the next election?
I don't, quite frankly, think it's an awfully good idea, because I think what is needed now is continuity. I really am serious about this. I think we need a strong person there. And not that Anne Widdecombe isn't strong. She is a very strong person, as indeed is Richard Shepherd, but I would like to see them there for a longer period than just a year's time.
Now, what about, is it possible that a Speaker could win this time, gets to the next election, say the Conservatives were to win the next election, they might try and push for another Speaker?
Well, that's always up to the House to push for what Speaker they want. But I don't look to the tribalism of the House. In my election, it was not a tribal vote, and I hope this is not going to be tribal. Of course, at the next election, if the Conservatives win, and if a Labour person is elected, they could put forward a Conservative candidate. They're quite free to do that. That's what our system is all about.
Can we just look briefly at one other subject? A lot of people talking today, and even people watching this who are not MPs, want the Speaker to solve almost everything about the House of Commons. Change it. Is that doable?
I'm afraid they do, and it is not doable. And it ought to be hit on the head right away. The Speaker has no power, but a lot of authority. And I think he can use his authority and his influence, or she could do that in very many ways. But the Speaker cannot change and cannot do things entirely alone. It has to be with the consent of the House. As Patrick Cormack made the point, the Speaker is the servant of this House. Lenthal said that many years ago.
One more area. People talk about the House of Commons taking power back to itself. MPs to decide who should be...
Yes.
Or backbench MPs,
yes.
deciding who are the chairman of select committees,
yes.
deciding the standing orders of the House,
yes.
not being bullied by the executive,
That's
by
right.
the government.
That's hugely important.
But this has always been open to the House of Commons.
It has, but you see, I think what has taken place is that over the years, for example, in 1997, whole new raft of members came in, more than 200. They didn't know the proceedings of the House, so they followed what the whips or other people told them, what their longer-standing members told them should do. And therefore, the authority that the House has seeped away to the executive in terms of legislation. Legislation is not scrutinised, it is not examined in the Commons as it should be. It is now, it used to be called guillotine. Every government has a right to get its legislation through. And if it's been filibustered, you put a guillotine on it, it comes back to the floor of the House and it's properly debated and voted upon. Now, as soon as a bill is published, it's called programming. We've got very posh words for things now. It's programmed, and you only do a third of it, or half of it, or 2/3 of it, and then it goes to the House of Lords. And it is not thoroughly scrutinised in the House of Commons. That will have to change. Another thing that would have to change...
Well, you say that will change. Can I just interrupt you briefly there? No, all right. You say that will have to change, but after the next election, we could get a very, very high turnover of new MPs. They'll again be told by what to do by whichever party wins.
I think that the political parties have learned their lesson in the recent months, quite frankly. I doubt that that's going to happen, because the political parties had their fingers burned in all sorts of ways, and now that we had the problem of expenses and all of this, it's all been looked at again. And of course, later this week, I believe there's going to be some move to look at the procedures in the House of Commons. So I don't think it will be the same thing will happen at the next election.
Do you miss being Speaker?
No, I loved it, but I don't miss it.
You don't miss
Best job in the world.
Because I'm told by one of the people who directs the coverage in the House of Lords, where you sit now, that when things are getting out of hand, you start shouting, order, order.
It's not true.
I'm told on good authority.
It isn't true, but...
They're saying order, order.
Sometimes I do, but quietly.
But thank you very much for the moment, Betty Boothroyd. The Speakership is obviously a great office of state and an ancient one at that. And my colleague, Andrew Wilson, has been examining the history of the Speaker. Let's take a look at his report.
Keeping order in the Commons can be a tricky business.
Order. Getting too noisy. Order. And I'm not getting much help from the Chief Whip. Maybe if I get a bit of help from the Chief Whip here. It'd be a bad day when I have to tell the Chief Whip to be quiet. But the Prime Minister must be heard.
Madam Speaker, given the fact that the craven attitude...
Order! The honourable gentleman will resume his seat immediately. Immediately! I shall name the honourable member. If he... Order!
Hats off, strangers.
But there are some perks for being the Speaker. A home in the palace with a built-in alarm clock and the title of First Commoner in the Land. It's an ancient office. The first Speaker, Sir Thomas Hungerford, was appointed in 1377, but long before the difficulties encountered by Michael Martin, who's standing down in the row over expenses, the Speaker's role proved a risky one. The earliest holders of the office were often agents of the monarch, but the King didn't always like what they had to say. A number of them lost their heads, which is why the Speaker never looks keen when first invited to the chair.
I wish to thank the House for the very great honour it has bestowed on me.
But in 1642, Speaker Lenthal asserted the rights of the House when Charles I came to arrest 5 MPs, telling him,
"I have neither eyes to see nor tongue to speak in this place, but as the House is pleased to direct me."
By the 19th century, the idea of the Speaker being above party had become the norm. On election, he or she quits party politics and pledges to defend the rights of all MPs.
A few examples there of Betty Boothroyd being shy and retiring, as she said, in the House of Commons. Well, MPs are going off to vote now, and we're expecting a result in about an hour and a half, maybe even an hour and a quarter by now. They are hoping to get these votes counted as quickly as possible. We'll be back with you then, so don't go away, because you don't want to miss the result of the first ballot. But for the moment, we're going to cross over to the House of Lords. We're going to have live coverage from the House of Lords, where peers are debating the Policing and Crime Bill. It's the first day of the committee stage.
Mainstream employment. So they were...
Appointments and all that goes into it. And what the panel...
Hello again and welcome to the new Speaker election Speakathon, this giant marathon debate lasting most of the day as the Commons assemble to elect their 157th Speaker. And in the Commons, the MPs are just returning to their seats, having been voting. They've had half an hour they were allowed to vote in the division lobbies for the secret ballot by the first time, and then they've taken almost an hour to count the votes. And we're waiting now for the declaration of the first ballot. Michael Martin, of course, was effectively forced out of office, and he was the first Speaker to have to leave office since Sir John Trevor in 1695, when he found himself at the centre of a House of Commons inquiry into corruption. And the extraordinary thing is that the public reaction at the time was very, very similar to what happened this time. A contemporary pamphlet noted that a common murmur arose that a universal corruption had overspread the nation, that court, camp and city were tainted, nay, the very Parliament itself infected. Well, that was in 1695. Things have been extraordinarily similar today. He was actually elected because he was a very honest man, but he got into this little problem he found himself, and he found himself receiving 1,000 guineas from the City of London in returning for helping the progress of a London Orphans Bill. And that's what did for Sir John Trevor. Because other speakers they've just got rid of far quicker by just executing them.
Off with their heads.
Off with their heads was the view. You survived that, didn't you, Betty?
Yes, I think it was 9. I had a very good relationship, though, with the palace, though. See, there were 9 speakers off with their heads, but my relationship with the palace was rather better than theirs.
That's very true. Now, because of the nature of the Commons picture, I can't see if the father of the house has taken his seat again yet. He hasn't taken his seat.
No.
He hasn't taken his seat. We can see the two clerks. You see in the background of your picture there, in front of the Speaker's chair, the two clerks. There's one more place at the clerk's bench, and we're waiting for that one to be filled. But let me ask our...
Oh, he is there, you see.
Order, please. This is the result of the first ballot. 594 ballots were cast. The numbers of votes cast for each candidate was as follows. Margaret Beckett, 74. Sir Alan Beith, 55. John Bercow, 179. Sir Patrick Cormack, 13. Mr. Parmjit Dhanda, 26. Sir Alan Haselhurst, 66. Sir Michael Lord, 9. Mr. Richard Shepherd, 15. Miss Anne Widdecombe, 44. Sir George Young, 112. One ballot was spoiled. No member received more than 50% of a ballot's cost. Sir Michael Lord received the fewest votes. Sir Patrick Cormack, Parmjit Dhanda and Richard Shepherd received fewer than 5% of the ballots cast. Before I confirm the list of candidates for the next ballot, I now invite any candidate who, in the result of this round, has decided they would like to withdraw from the next round. I would like them to come and inform me here in the chamber within the next 10 minutes. The next ballot will then be opened as soon as the ballot papers have been printed, checked and put in place, which is likely to be about 30 minutes from now. I will cause the bells to be rung as soon as the lobbies are ready, and the ballot will then start. As before, members will have 30 minutes to vote. Thank you.
Well, so we've got rid of 4 candidates on the first ballot. Very interesting layout at the top. John Bercow came top, 179, followed by Sir George Young, 112, Margaret Beckett on 74, and then Alan Haselhurst, 66, Alan Beith, Sir Alan Beith, 55, and Anne Widdecombe, the candidate who only says she wants to be Speaker until the next election, 44. Now, we've got a rather unusual position in the Commons. Not only have we had secret voting, we now have a sort of 10 minutes time where people can, it's rather like a séance, the next bit, people can be moved to withdraw, or they don't withdraw. But we've got a very interesting layout. Now, I think the best thing is if I can bring in our political correspondent, Carol Walker, here. Carol, what's the news? What are you finding that people are talking about down there?
Well, I think, as you mentioned there, clearly 4 candidates will be dropping out. I don't think there'll be any huge surprise at those that have come nearest to the bottom. Clearly they themselves will be very disappointed. I'm sure Sir Patrick Cormack will be very disappointed to have only gathered 13 votes there. But I think what is fascinating now will be to see, firstly, how their votes are redistributed. So if you are a supporter, for example, of Michael Lord or of Richard Shepherd, who you would choose of those who are still in the race. You might suspect that maybe somebody like Sir Alan Haselhurst might expect to pick up some of the votes for those that have gone to the more traditional candidates. Of course, everyone in this is a reformer, everyone's going for change. But some will be perceived as perhaps bolder than others. There has to be a question, I think, as to whether Anne Widdecombe will decide to fight on. 32 votes, I think, is the cut-off point, 5%.
That's right, yes.
She's got above that, but whether she will consider that it's worth continuing now in the hope of picking up considerable numbers in the next round, or whether in the next 10 minutes or so she might decide to throw her hat in and throw in the towel, rather, and decide to stand down at this stage.
You know, what surprises me, Daniel, is I think we said at the very beginning of all of this there was something like 638.
Yeah, 638 possible, and 594 did vote.
Yes, but now there's a lot of people who didn't vote.
Yes, yes.
Who are they?
Well, of course, we don't know whether they are people who are away on.
Some will be ill, some will be away.
Yes, but it's quite a
whether
lot.
Some people are ill.
Quite a lot on a big occasion like this, don't you think?
Well, the total House of Commons on 646. Some are ineligible, like Sinn Féin.
Yeah.
We had a potential of 638.
Yes.
What may be interesting, Carol, is the person who in a way came third. You've got John Bercow on 179. You've got George Young on 112. And then there's Margaret Beckett on 74. Now, are Margaret Beckett's votes going to go up, or are they going to say, oh, I think we'll go for George Young? Or we'll go for Bercow and be done with it?
That is the great imponderable. That is the great imponderable.
How can you answer that?
Well, we have to ask a speaker. Come on, what's going to happen?
There's no...
We can't argue.
No, you can't judge what
do you think, Carol?
Well, I think what's fascinating in this is that, although, of course, some MPs have been very open in talking about who they'll support, others have played their cards a bit closer to their chests. It's been very difficult to find anyone who'll tell you what their second preference would be.
Yes.
They won't want to give that away in advance. So I think it's very, very difficult to calculate where the second preference votes will go.
Do you think Betty will see a rallying round the top three, or will it not be as simple as that?
I don't know that it will be as simple as that, but you see, you're quite right. You've had your ear to the ground over the last few days. I haven't been in the Commons even today. So I don't know. It's this second vote that is now crucial.
And maybe a third. Carol, do you think we're on for two ballots
we'll
or
go for
three?
Won't we?
I would have thought, looking at the basis of this, that there will certainly be at least a third round.
Yes.
And there has to be, of course, the possibility of a fourth round as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Which could mean a very, very long evening indeed.
You know, Daniel, this is like Waiting for Godot, and I'm going to see Waiting for Godot tomorrow night if
we get out of
I
here.
can remain awake that long, actually.
Yes. And if we get out of here at this... Well, actually, your house, your present house, the Lords, they've got to do approbation at the end of tonight. They're not prepared to go on too late, actually. They're saying...
Quite right, and if it goes on too late, then they must wait until tomorrow morning, isn't that right?
Yes, if they can't get it sorted, because they're a bit nervous in the House of Lords of getting in touch with the Queen after about 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, that's right.
Presumably she wants to watch the news, but then if she wants to know who's won the Speakership, she's got to stay on.
Probably the news is more important to the
Well, certainly we're looking at around about 2 hours for each round of voting.
Yes. Yes.
By the time you have allowed for the kind of hiatus that we're seeing here and for the ballot papers to be reprinted each time around.
There are big groans from MPs every time they say it's going to be a long time till we open the next ballot.
Gisela Stewart's face behind us.
Yes, I see.
There was a picture of her rolling her eyes as she...
I wonder how many will stand the pace, how many will stay to the bitter end, do you think? They'll all whistle no on the next...
Well, let's just quickly look back into the Commons. You see, now what we're seeing is something very unusual in the Commons. They're just sort of standing around gossiping, and if someone feels sufficiently moved, as I say, it is rather like a Quaker meeting house, they can get up and say, I've decided to leave the race. And maybe, do you think that's a bit of canvassing going on down there on the government benches, just on those back benches?
A bit of persuasion, do you think?
A bit of persuasion. I wonder if people are crossing the floor.
Well, one wonders also whether those candidates who are closer to the bottom, like Sir Alan Haselhurst, like Anne Widdecombe, will be speaking to those candidates who are dropping out, or the key campaign managers of the people who are dropping out, to see if they're willing to kind of commit themselves in this second round. I mean, it is a very unusual experience.
Of course it is.
But normally, when you hand your votes over to a candidate, think of an American election, people say, vote for him, and, you know, and then they get something to benefit from it at the end of it. If you've thrown in the towel and say, I'm voting with Margaret Beckett or John Bercow or George Young, you sort of expect something in return.
There's nothing here, nothing in return.
Nothing in return, is
well,
there?
maybe a drink in Speaker's House, whoever is elected, something like that.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure none of the MPs are going into this thinking, well, if I support this candidate, I'll be able to catch their eye. I mean, it simply wouldn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. No, I think they're just quite genuinely wondering where they should put their second vote.
OK, well, let's skip on to the final ballot, imaginary. Can you tell yet, Carol, and Betty, who you think the final playoff will be?
Oh, goodness, what a question. What about you, Carol?
Well, you would have to put John Bercow and Sir George Young in pole position, if you like, to be amongst those final three. But the big question, I think, is what happens to Margaret Beckett's vote? You posed the question as to whether it would go up or down in the next round. Well, that is the key thing. If you are a supporter of one of these four who are dropping out, and we don't know whether somebody else will, would you then perhaps plump for... What about Alan Beith? Could he, although he hasn't done terribly well in the first round...
Oh, you could see someone going up.
Could he be banking? Could Alan Beith be banking on getting a lot of second preference votes?
Oh, I see. So you mean he's saying he might pick up some Alan Haselhurst, he might pick up some Widdecombe or something.
Or Patrick Cormack.
Yes. They're going begging, aren't there? Not too many of them, but there's Richard Shepherd's 15.
And Michael Lord.
And Michael Lord's.
Lord, yes.
You only had a minute or two to talk about the candidates when they spoke. You managed to get a few well-chosen words in between. But overall, how did you look back at it?
I thought they were very interesting. I thought they were very, very good speeches. They put a lot of thought into them. I thought they were top speeches, quite frankly, all of them.
And very fluent.
And very fluent, very articulate. They were good speakers. And I want the time to come back, you know, when at a general election we do have a hustings in the country where there are public meetings in our village halls, in our schools and that sort of thing. And I think as a result...
Oh, we hardly ever have public meetings for...
I didn't
When did you last have a public meeting?
In about 1979, I think.
Last time you had a public meeting in your constituency?
Yes, because you people like you have the leaders on television now, so...
Oh, and
they
people
don't bother
like you have party leaders who control everything.
With all sarangs. But seriously, because of what has happened in the Commons, I think now the great British electorate are going to want to see their candidates. They're going to see, and they're going to want to go into a public meeting, see the colour of their eyes, listen to what they have to say, ask questions.
I wondered what you thought, Betty, of the suggestion from Parmjit Dhanda, who said that perhaps Parliament itself should go and sit in Birmingham, Manchester and some of our big cities.
I don't...
Whether that would... He made the case there, didn't he, in his speech, for saying that that would engage people more in the work of Parliament.
I believe they did that in medieval times. They moved around. Around.
We're going back to Alan Williams now.
Sir Alan Beith, John Bercow, Sir Alan Haselhurst, Miss Anne Widdecombe and Sir George Young. It will be opened as soon as the ballot papers have been printed, checked and put in place. This is likely to take about 20 minutes. I'll have the bells rung as soon as the lobbies are ready and the ballot will then start. As before, members will have 30 minutes to vote.
So that is the announcement of the second ballot. No one decided to withdraw at this stage. So, for MPs, well, they have to wait now, 20 minutes at least, until the ballot papers for the next round are ready. So more canvassing can go on. While we're just looking at those pictures, I wondered if we could just come back on that subject before moving on, if that's OK. We've got a little time before here. That thing about reinvigorating Parliament and the Chamber, but there's a lot of government ministers, Betty, who actually think it's more important, the constituency is more important, not the Chamber. Yeah. Doing work in the constituency is more important, not doing work in the Chamber. That's quite a popular opinion.
I don't go along with that. I think the Member of Parliament is a representative not in the constituency, but at Westminster. Otherwise, they tend to become social workers if they remain too much in their constituency. Their job is at Westminster. This is where it should be. Leave it to the councillors, leave it to other people in the constituency. democracy. The work of a Member of Parliament is representing their constituents at Westminster.
But that's not what many MPs think now, is it?
Whatever they think. I mean, I can have my own opinion.
Yes, yes,
Whatever
that is
they
allowed.
That's allowed, is it? For me to express an opinion. That's what I believe. And the question that, if I may just move to what was put to me a little while ago about moving Parliament, have it meeting in some of our great cities, I remember as a very young person working in the House of Commons, I did some research on this 100 years ago, and we had a Parliament that moved around York and various places in the country. I am not in favour of that. It's all taking Parliament to the people. The Parliament's place is here at Westminster. I do not want to see an itinerant Parliament. We have enough of an itinerant Parliament in Europe, in the European Parliament. And the expense of moving from Brussels to Strasbourg and all over the place, I don't think this is for this country. That's my answer to that.
Well, let's come back. Maybe we can see you in the studio here before our studio evaporates, along with Cinderella, when the money runs out in the fuel that we've put in. Oh, no, we have put in extra fuel. Well, on that point of how would you reinvigorate the Commons? Because it does seem to die early on in the week.
Well, I would...
And a lot of viewers to us say, why is it so empty? Why is it so empty?
It empties one of the
reasons...
reasons...
full, but why is it
Yes,
so...
I think one of the reasons that it empties is because Prime Minister's question time is now just one block in the middle of the week. And after that, and... next week's business, when you can question the Leader of the House, there is very little going on. And because often an opposition does not know how to use the standing orders to demand an emergency debate or a special debate on something. It also, I think, is empty to some extent because in recent years we have enunciators all in our offices, corridors, all over the place. So a Member of Parliament can stay in her office, work there, keep an eye on what is going on in Parliament. And that has killed it to some extent. Not saying to do away with the enunciators, but I'm just dealing with the facts as I see them, and this is what has spoiled the Commons chamber itself.
It was interesting that when you listen to those speeches from all the candidates, I think every single one of them said that in some way or another the business of the House needs to be taken out of the hands of the government to some degree or another. There's a lot of talk about tilting the power away from the
MPs never seem to be bold enough to actually do that, do they? It is within their power. It is within their power now.
Of course it is, and they have the...
Would they be brave enough?
In practice, it is quite difficult, though, isn't it? In practice, it is quite difficult to actually to force control. I mean, what we do see is when you see a private notice question, when a minister is forced to give a statement. And I think one of the things that all the candidates seem to be looking at is ways of triggering more topical debates or triggering... I'm now struggling to remember which candidate it was, said that perhaps the chair of a select committee could make a statement on an important report.
Well, you see, when you talk about select committees, it's not that long ago, a few years ago, you will recall that on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and the Transport Committee, Gwyneth Dunwoody and the chairman of the International Affairs Committee, the government didn't want them. They tried to get rid of them.
Yes, it did.
And I spoke out on that, as did the House.
That was one of the very rare rebellion on that sort of thing.
But it can be done, as you're saying, but it takes a lot of doing. Now, I understand that later this week that we'll have some proposals from a particular committee that is going to look at the proceedings in the House. I hope they're going to look at the way that...
This is the Tony Wright committee.
Yes, select committees work. And that we have the reports of select committees debated on the floor of the House. They collect dust on the shelves.
But what happens is the only people actually debating them are the members of the select committee. In reality, that's what happens.
Well, it should be open to other members to come in. And
it's always open to them, but they don't turn up.
Well, maybe the whips should have a word there. This is where the whips. This is where the role of the whips comes in, to see that they come in there, and also on legislation, on issues such as that. Prime Minister's questions. It needs a lot of improvement on Prime Minister's questions, don't you think? Nobody learns anything from Prime Minister's questions these days. It's just a whole lot of noise and yaboo, and I don't believe that the British public want all of that. They don't want the personal abuse that goes on at question time. They want snappy questions put by the opposition, and they want snappy answers put by the government in answer to policy, what policy they're pursuing. That is what is needed. And people today, I've just been told by somebody they love watching Prime Minister's questions. I said, what do you learn about it? Well, nothing, but it's sort of theatre. Well, of course, Westminster...
Well, do you want a silent house?
Westminster, yes. Well, I don't want a silent house. I want a robust house. I don't want a noisy house. I want a house that is robust, where there is the cut and thrust of debate when there is debate. But when it is a question-answer, I want to hear the question and I want to hear the answer, and you can't do it at the present time.
I can't think of a leader or Prime Minister who hasn't started off by saying, let's get away from the yaboo of politics. They all say, let's get away from the yaboo of politics.
Then they move into it.
David Cameron even started off asking more...
Reasoned, considered questions.
For which he was sort of seeking information, reasonable answers. But that lasted, what, a couple of weeks? Perhaps it was a little bit longer than that.
We're about to turn into a pumpkin, but I've got a treat for you. While we can still see you.
Well, I like treats.
Yeah, good. Well, we have got a treat because a week or so ago we asked some of your deputy speakers about the job and about the job of Speaker. We talked to Lord Lofthouse, Baroness Fuchs, Lord Naseby, all of whom you know in the House of Lords.
Yes.
And they told us what they thought about the job of Speaker.
Oh, good. So we're hearing that.
Rather quietly.
Well, we haven't got that bit, as you may have noticed.
Now, this is a silence. I'm not wanting...
silent bit, which was well done, but it was a good read into it. How do we think we're going to... Are we not getting that
I'd like
piece
to
of
hear
tape?
all about that. Can't they do something about it?
Well,
Yes.
Are we hearing it?
Oh, we're going to try again. We're going to try again. So here are a selection of 3 of your deputy speakers.
Once more with feeling.
Once more with feeling. Lord Lofthouse, Baroness Fuchs, Lord Naseby, talking about their time as deputy speaker and how to be speaker.
First, absolute fairness and impartiality, and I do believe in that. It's absolutely essential. And of course, if they know that you are fair and impartial, then I think you earn the respect in those circumstances. And the other thing, I think, is to stick to what you say you'll do and do it.
Number 1, you've got to gain the trust. And by that I mean they've got to recognise that you are being impartial.
Firstly, patience. You're in that chair a very, very long time. Secondly, powers of concentration, because if you don't concentrate, some devil will get up somewhere and catch you out. And thirdly, you really do need to learn everybody's name.
There is a great problem with a new parliament, new people coming in. Would you like me to tell you how we cope with that? They got a kind of photographic album put in political sections, like Labour, Conservative, Liberal, Democrat, whatever it was, and the photographs of the people. And then you had to go a quick look through. You knew it was perhaps Labour, so you'd quickly look through and see if you could match up the face and the name. In more normal times, when it's more usual, one of the ways you can get yourself out of a problem is to ring a discreet bell, which doesn't sound in the chamber, and an attendant comes forth and you say, who's the chap on the left in a yellow tie, next to somebody you did know? And usually they would know.
I would take great care on what bow tie I was wearing each day, not because I wish to be a dandy or anything, but if I was going to have a difficult day, I would wear a quiet bow tie. If I thought that they needed beating over the heads or something, then I'd wear a fairly flashy bow tie. And if England were playing at Lord's, I'd wear the MCC tie.
Since we've been about 27 years old, our chairmen of miners' lodges in the area and things like that. And if you you can't get a better training than that, I can assure you.
You do need to be confident. I'm not talking about being overconfident or bombastic, but you need to have confidence in your own power to control. And because I started life as a school teacher, so I looked upon them as a rather unruly class, if the need arose. But you have to distinguish between those who are really playing up and those who inadvertently slip up on rules. And I think you treat them differently.
Well, I hope we can, we're not too savage in taking the action without alter the procedures at all, or the powers of the Speaker. I think we've got to have our guidance by previous speakers, Betty and Gandalline, George Thomas, Bernard Wetherill. They were, in my view, they will view the fine examples of what the Speaker should be. We should get back there.
It's a great office of state, and I hope that it remains so, that we still have those qualities in the Speaker which I have just outlined. It's timeless.
I just hope that they restore something that's very, very important, which is the whole status of Parliament and our democracy. And that's quite a heavy burden, because we've taken a lot of hits recently, and it is the Speaker now, not the Prime Minister or whoever that may be. It's the Speaker who's got to stamp their authority and prove that the House of Commons is something very special and something we should value as a nation.
You want me to give the kind of bellow that I would give? Yes.
As if you're in the chair.
OK.
Order, order.
Order, order.
Order, order.
Redoubtable, redoubtable indeed, Janet Folkes, Baroness Folkes. I hope you enjoyed that, Betty.
Very much so.
We'll be back now at the Speakathon continues. We'll be back at 7 o'clock, just before 7 maybe. Don't come back early, you don't want to miss it. We'll be back with the result of the second ballot. We'll see who goes into the lead then. Could it be decided, or will we have to go for a third ballot? In the meantime, let's go back to live proceedings in the House of Lords, where they're still dealing with the Policing and Crime Bill.
It goes against the spirit of giving more control.
Chief Officer or the Chief Officer.
Welcome back to round 3 of the Speakathon, and we are in the House of Commons waiting for the result of the second ballot. Packed House, it's been packed since...
Yes, they're all there.
I'm joined again by Betty Boothroyd, Baroness Boothroyd, former Speaker, and here we are.
The second ballot. 599 ballots were cast. Margaret Beckett, 70. Sir Alan Beith, 46. John Bercow, 221. Sir Alan Haselhurst, 57. Miss Anne Widdecombe, 30. Sir George Young, 174. One ballot was spoiled.
How can they
Well,
spoil
at least
that?
one of you is being consistent. No member received more than 50% of the ballots cast. Miss Anne Widdecombe received the fewest votes. Before I confirm the list of candidates for the next ballot, I invite, almost beg, any candidate who wishes... I'm getting older. I invite any candidate who wishes to withdraw to inform me, please, in the chamber within the next 10 minutes. The next ballot will be opened as soon as the ballot papers have been printed, checked and put in place, which is likely to take about 30 minutes from now. I will have the bells rung as soon as the lobbies are ready, and the ballot will then start. I've made a change to the voting time. Under the powers given to me under the standing order, the time for voting for the next ballot will be reduced to 20 minutes. Thank you.
Betty Boothroyd there, showing her appreciation. Joined still by Betty Boothroyd. You like the idea of them cutting down a bit,
Well, I do, actually. They can do it. The clerks are very efficient, and there's electronic printing, so there's no reason why they shouldn't move it on a little bit. But what do you reckon of this, Daniel? 5 members more voted this time than previously.
5 members more. I think we should just look again at the
Yes,
votes.
do
Top
that.
of the poll, John Bercow, 221.
Yep.
He's up from 179. Sir George Young, second on the poll, a big increase in his vote. Well, let me see now. John Bercow's vote went up by 42, and Sir George Young's vote has gone up by 62. So, Margaret Beckett's has gone down 4. She's on 70. Alan Haselhurst has gone down 9. Alan Beith, she's on Alan Haselhurst 57 this time, 66 the first time. Alan Beith 55 in the first round, 46 on the second. He is also down 9. And Anne Widdecombe taking a bit of a tumble. She's down from 44 to 30. She's lost 14. It's beginning to look like a two-horse race, Betty.
It is, isn't it? Yes. Where do you suppose Anne Widdecombe's votes went? Are you brave enough to tell us this, what you think about this? I don't know. I don't know.
Well...
It's anybody's guess, isn't it?
We had the votes from the smaller number of votes for Richard Shepherd,
yes.
Patrick Cormack, Parmjit Dhanda,
and yeah.
And
Michael Lord.
Michael Lord.
Yes.
Which was a few. Let me see. Yes, that was 9 to Michael Lord, 15 to Richard Shepherd,
13 to Cormack.
13 to Cormack.
26 to Dhanda.
26 to Dhanda. Yeah. So actually he was the top of that also, Rands,
yes,
the Gloucester MP.
Yeah.
So there was 26, 39, 45, 50, 60. 60 votes going begging.
63 votes going
63
begging.
going begging.
Yeah.
So some people have actually changed their vote.
Yes.
It isn't just those 63
No.
because John Bercow's gone up 42 and Sir George
Margaret
Young's gone up
Beckett has
60.
how many on this second ballot?
She had 70 this time.
She had 74 before.
And 74.
So she's lost 4 votes.
It
there.
looks as if she is now dropping down a little.
I think so. It looks like it, doesn't it? There are two. Don't you think it's a two-horse race?
It's beginning to look that way.
Yeah.
We're clearly no one showing. Although the father of the house, Alan Williams, appealed valiantly.
Yes. Nobody's withdrawing, are they?
No, he's been there 45 years. I expect he knows the House of Commons well enough to know that.
Yeah, he's got a feel for it. He knows they're going to stick it out to the bitter end.
We're going to stick it out, are we?
Well, I'm trying my best to do that. But interesting, George Young's vote has increased by 62 votes.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
He's gone up by 62. I see there's a lot of attention being paid to a Conservative on the Conservative backbenchers, right at the end there, almost level with the
who it is.
Level with the Speaker's chair.
Is it?
Cannot see who.
No, I can't.
That's where what we have got, Betty, is actually 2 Conservatives in the lead.
Yeah.
Do you feel we should see a Tory next time? This time?
I think it will be a Tory this time. I have never belonged to the school of thought that says, well, it's our turn next, chaps. I don't think that is the attitude. I think that the House has not got to be tribal about these things, and they've got to take the person that they think is going to be their best speaker and carry the House with them. And it's going to be a Tory this time, by the look of these votes.
Sir George Young, he promised to be quite an active speaker, very determined to seize rights, or as he saw it, seize rights back for the House of Commons. You think that's harder done than said?
Yes, it is harder done than said, but Sir George Young is a very experienced parliamentarian, you know. He's been a minister, a very hard-working minister. I remember as a backbencher, Sir George Young was there practically every night, 10:30, taking the adjournment debates, practically every night. And so he's a very experienced parliamentarian. And he knows how far the Speaker can go, but of course any Speaker needs the backing and the support of the House to do what they need to do.
He's the MP for North West Hampshire, has been there since 1997. Before that, he was in a very different seat indeed,
Yes.
Ealing Acton.
Yes.
He had a rather odd career under Margaret Thatcher. He sort of started up a little bit under the ministerial level. He clearly wasn't of her temperament.
He wasn't, no. She didn't think he was one of us, I think.
I think he wasn't. That's where he got his nickname, the bicycling
peer.
The bicycling baronet.
baronet.
Oh, peer
yes,
to come. He's only a baronet at the moment. You're the only peer in the room. Yes, it took him a little time to get office, a couple of years. He then disappeared off to the backbenchers between 86 and 90, and just before she went, Margaret Thatcher brought him back again.
Yes.
But look, John Bercow, the Conservative MP for Buckingham, said to be more the favourite of Labour MPs than Conservative MPs, and of course Labour MPs considerably outnumber
That's right.
the Conservatives in this House of Commons. They have 348 at the moment.
I would have guessed that Bercow's picked up a lot of Labour votes there.
Well, let me see. There are 348 Labour MPs, 193 Tories, 63 Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru on 3, SNP on 7, DUP 9, Independents 5, and 1 or 2 sundry others. The 5 Sinn Féiners don't vote. The Father of the House doesn't vote either. On this occasion, the Deputy Speakers do vote.
I never voted in my election, you know.
Didn't you?
No, I sat on the benches and waited.
Why didn't you vote?
I didn't think it was right to vote for myself. I just sat there, and I remember Edwina Curry coming into the chamber, and I was very lonely sitting there, and she looked up at me, and she'd just come from the division lobby, and she said, "You're going to get it." She said, "There was more of our people voting in your lobby." She was the first one that gave me some indication that I was going to win. I didn't vote for myself, no.
What was your majority?
Oh, it was about 79, 8 in the 80s.
Oh, pretty good.
Oh, it was good.
Pretty good.
I didn't want a handful, which I thought, Daniel, I might just get a handful, and that is what I didn't want. I wanted a resounding victory. And I got all the minority parties, and I got, it was a much larger majority. I can't remember what my majority was, because I got something like 79 Conservative votes. So it must have been very substantial.
599 MPs voted that time. 5 decided to come out of the woodwork and vote in the second round.
Yeah.
We're talking about someone needing, you need 50% plus 1, so you need 3, on that poll of 599, you need 300 votes to win. So no one's, John Bercow's 80 off, even now. There's still something to be fought over, and my guess, we're going to say goodbye to Anne Widdecombe. There's 160 odd seats there, 160 odd votes.
That's right.
Now we've got 646 MPs in Parliament, Betty. Too many? Too few?
I think there are too many. I think that the size of the Commons could be considerably reduced. Now, I'm not in the numbers game, Daniel, but I would have thought something around 400, 450 is quite enough.
That's quite a big cut.
Well, it's a big cut, I know, but you see, the means of communication today, the technology that there is, the staff that they have, it could be very considerably reduced, and members still do a job at Westminster. I mean, I think far too many people look to their Member of Parliament to do a job that is the job of the social worker in their constituency, or the councillor, instead of representing them at Westminster. It could be cut, but you know, in order to do a boundary redistribution, I think I'm right in saying the Commons has to give instructions to the Boundary Commission to look at the boundaries, and that is like turkeys voting for Christmas.
That is a problem. Now, at the bottom of our screen, we can see the Conservative MP for Buckingham talking with MP colleagues. Yes. Is that Paul Flynn he's with?
Is that him? Yes, that's
here?
right, yes.
So he's certainly talking to one Labour MP, he may be talking to more Labour MPs. He is right at the bottom. And George Young, I think that's George Young, between the two gangways, just working his way along the Conservative benches. He's kneeling on the second bench row.
Order.
Here we go.
Margaret Beckett, Sir Alan Haselhurst and Sir Alan Beith have all withdrawn. The candidates for the next ballot are John Bercow and Sir George Young. It will be opened as soon as the ballot papers have been printed, checked and put in place, which is likely to be in about 20 minutes. I will have the bells rung as soon as the lobbies are ready, and the ballot will then start. Members will have 20 minutes this time for their vote. Thank you.
This is as exciting as I've known it to be.
We're into a third ballot,
yes,
but it is only a two-horse race this time.
That's right.
This time, they have withdrawn the 3 bottom candidates. That was Anne Widdecombe, Sir Alan Beith, and
Haselhurst.
And Sir Alan Haselhurst. Between them, they've got...
how many votes?
I'm just trying to work it out here. 70, 127, about 135 odd votes, roughly, to distribute.
Oh.
So...
I'm not going to analyse where they're going to go. Don't look at me like that.
Don't analyse, just guess.
I can't guess. I can't. I'm not going to guess.
You're not going to guess?
No.
Well, you're not going to tell us who you want to see.
No, I'm not.
So you might as well guess.
I think they'll go to Bercow.
Right, well, the former Speaker, Betty Boothroyd...
That was a guess, you know.
On her guess, no more than a guess, has officially said...
No, it's not official.
On her guess, only a guess, that it's going to go to John Bercow. OK, well, I better go for Sir George Young then, hadn't I?
Yes, you had, yeah.
Sir George Young. Now, we've got 20 minutes until they open the voting again.
Mm-hmm.
And then the vote itself is going to take a further 20 minutes only. So we're going to be back in about 45 minutes from now.
30 and 20.
What do we reckon the 1 hour 40 that we're back here, is that right? So we think it's 8:40 that we're back here. Right, sorry, my calculation's not very good there.
You're not as numerous as I expected you to be.
No,
Tiredness coming in now.
Tiredness coming in, and you had enough divisions to count as Speaker. I thought it was 20 minutes until the ballot opened, and then 20 minutes for voting. Oh, then we got counting.
They've got the counting too, yes.
Well, last time they counted in rather quicker than what they said they were doing. I suspect 40 minutes at most, maybe quicker. There's only 2 candidates.
That's right, it'll be quicker this time.
50, 70, could be done in actually maybe much nearer 8:30 or even marginally before. So after a very great deal of calculating, a lot of nodding heads at the glass, looking pleased with themselves that they managed to calculate that, we think a result coming at about 8:20, 8:30,
yes.
somewhere around there. So I would, on the whole, I'd be retuned back in. I wouldn't leave your seat, actually. I would stay watching, because who knows when this ballot is going to declare. I'm just going to pick up
one...
one...
And the lobbying that's going on. Look, isn't that Bercow down there chatting with...
There is a lot of Bercow lobbying with Lembit
Yes,
Opik?
Lembit Opik, that's right,
Lembit
yes.
Opik, who had an interesting claim for a really interesting wig on his expenses. Maybe they're discussing whether he'll wear the wig. Maybe they are discussing whether he'll wear the wig.
Maybe he's going to rent it out.
Well, yes, if John Bercow is going to wear the wig, would he like to borrow Lembit Opik's? And
Who's that other chap talking with him? We don't see who.
Can't see who's there.
No.
Betty Boothroyd, you made a speech before you submitted yourself for this ballot. Who were you against on your ballot?
Well, the main contender was Peter Brook.
Oh yes,
Peter Brook, who had been senior minister and had been Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. And I do believe that one of his forebears had occupied the chair at some stage. A terribly nice man, very gracious.
You see him still in the House of Lords?
Yes, very gracious when I was victorious. But he was the problem that I had to deal with, as it were, put it like that.
And you had your main two supporters. They were one from the Tories and one from Labour.
John Biffin. I was absolutely astounded, because one day John Biffin came to me and he said, he was rather a shy man. I felt that he was very shy in terms of personal relationships. And he said, but he did approach me one day and he said, I do hope you're going to run as Speaker, etc., etc. And I was taken aback by this. So I gave it a good deal of thought. I said, well, I'll let you know. And when it did come to decision time for me, I called him up and I said, look, you did approach me a long time ago and I've decided I'm going to run, but now, having been approached by you originally, I really want you to make the senior nomination. And he said, yes, I'll be very, very happy to do that. He didn't hesitate at all, and you'll see from your Hansard there that he nominated me.
Looking through my Hansard here, thank you very much, Betty, what was so interesting was the debate about whether there should even be a woman Speaker for the first time. It doesn't even bother anyone now.
No, not at all.
But at the time you said having a competent woman Speaker may be a good thing. Having a bad woman Speaker would be disastrous.
It would be disastrous. It would be a tragedy for the House, and it would be bad for the country, and it would be bad for the cause of women everywhere. And I also said, one of the phrases that I shall never forget, I pleaded with the Commons, elect me for what I am, not for what I was born. Meaning, elect me because I can do the job, not because I was born a woman.
And they did.
And they did. They paid attention for the first time.
And you must be thrilled. I think what we should do now is rejoin the House of Lords, who are still sitting on the policing and crime bill. We will be back here at about an hour and 10 minutes, about an hour and 8 minutes, something like 8:20. We know we'll get a result next time.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to have a result.
Final. And we get the approbation probably tonight, won't we?
That will be an hour and a half. After the final result, what happens is the Prime Minister writes a letter to the Queen with the result on. That letter will be taken to Buckingham Palace.
Yes.
from someone from the Prime Minister's office. The letter will be signed by the Queen, initialled by the Queen, just ER, initial, but she will sign a warrant, which will also come in the same car with the Clerk of the Chamber from the House of Lords. The Deputy Clerk of the Crown will bring with him a warrant, and that warrant appoints the Royal Commissioners who will act in the Queen's name in the House of Lords, and to give her assent. It's not that she has to... She only sort of gives her assent to the appointment. It's not that she's actually granting it.
No, she said, well, go ahead so far.
We'll go ahead with that. So we are looking forward to just a brief timetable then. Next result at 8:20. We reckon after that it'll be 1.5 hours till royal approbation is given in the House of Lords. That'll be something like 10 to 10.
That's right. Just the nick of time. Very good timing.
Good timing. Well, look, many thanks, Betty. See you again for the next round. Go and have a run round the block like last time.
I get some fresh air,
In this way, a police authority can already deliver some...
Now, to the House of Lords and the Policing and Crime Bill, where the Security Minister, Lord West, is replying to Pear's points.
Is ultimately responsible for policing in its own area is sound and should remain at the core of what a police authority is all about, whether it exercises that responsibility collaboratively or independently.
My Lords, I beg to move the House to adjourn during pleasure until 2038.
The question is that the House do now adjourn during pleasure until 8:38. As many as that opinion will say content, the contrary not content, the contents have it.
Good evening and welcome back again to part 4 of the Speakathon extravaganza as we await the third and final ballot result between John Bercow and Sir George Young to see who will become the 157th Speaker of the House of Commons. You've just seen an interesting array of clocks, the reason being that the House of Lords has just adjourned for 8 minutes. They've just been having their dinner interval debate. They're waiting for the main debate to get back underway again. And the Commons are due to resit at 8:30 for the vote. So, I'd welcome again Betty Boothroyd, Baroness Boothroyd, who stuck with us through the day. You've managed to do 6 hours now.
It's been a very long day, Daniel. But an exciting one.
Good. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
And here we are, back in the House of Commons. The Commons is sitting.
Very full house.
Full house.
Yes.
And they await the declaration of the result.
You see, standing room only. There isn't enough room for all members to sit in that house.
This looks like the busiest kind of Prime Minister's questions, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Interestingly, the Speaker wasn't always an independent chair. That rarely only happened after the restoration of the monarchy from about 1660. Up until then, Speakers had been actually quite partisan. And in a way, that may explain why an American Speaker of the House of Representatives is actually the leader of the biggest party in the House of Representatives. The US stuck with the system of the Speaker being
a party person, yes.
Being a party person.
And in fact, the Speaker is now, the lady Speaker in the House of Representatives, very much a party person.
And that was an interesting change. And funny enough, it was the UK that made the change into into an independent Speaker. Here come the results from Alan Williams, Father of the House.
This is the result of the third ballot. 593 ballots were cast. The number of votes cast for each candidate was as follows. John Bercow, 322. Yes! Sir George Young, 271.
well, Betty, you've been in this position.
And Margaret, you take a deep breath and your legs are weak. I don't know whether you can stand up. You feel so excited about it all. I have been in that position. Now, where is supporters? What are they going to do? Do they...
A majority of 50, a majority of 51 over Sir George Young.
Good majority.
Let's make sure we sign it off properly. Mr. John Bercow has secured more than 50% of the ballots cast. The question is that Mr. John Bercow take the chair of this House as Speaker. As many of you as of that opinion say aye. Aye! Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Congratulations, Mr. Speaker Bercow.
Speaker Bercow, Speaker-elect Bercow, being dragged to the chair. And John Bercow takes the seat as the 157th Speaker of the House of Commons.
Thank you. My first pleasant duty is warmly to thank on behalf of us all Alan Williams for the magnificent and good-humoured way in which he's conducted this election. It's been a very long day. And those of you expecting a customarily lengthy diatribe will be sorely disappointed. I should like to thank and pay a heartfelt tribute to all of the candidates who stood in this election. It has been a constructive debate that we have enjoyed over the last few weeks. I confess that I have the highest regard for all of the other candidates. Each brought something to the occasion, each had a contribution to make, and I can honestly say that each made that contribution in the most sincere and constructive fashion to the great and continuing benefit of this House. Yeah. Colleagues, you will understand that my thoughts at this time are above all with my family, my wife Sally, our three very young children, Oliver, Freddie and Jemima, not to mention my beloved mother, who's been keenly interested in the proceedings. Colleagues, you have just bestowed upon me the greatest honour that I have enjoyed in my professional life. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the confidence that you have placed in me. And I'm keenly aware of the obligations into which I now enter. And I want just to say this about the responsibility of the office. I said only a few hours ago in my speech that if elected, a Speaker has a responsibility immediately and permanently to cast aside all of his or her previous political views. I said it, and I said it and I meant it. My commitment to this House is to be completely impartial as between members of one political party and another. That is what it's about. And I will do my best, faithfully and honourably and effectively, to serve this House in the period ahead. We have faced quite the most testing times. It has been a gruelling experience. Many members feel very sore and very vulnerable, but large sections of the public also feel angry and disappointed. We do have to reform, but I just want to say that I continue to believe that the vast majority of members of this House are upright, decent, honourable people who have come into politics not to feather their nests, but because they have heeded the call of public service. They want to serve their constituents, to make a difference, to improve the lot of their fellow citizens in this country. And for such people, I shall always have the highest respect. And it is on that basis, with that conviction, and in that spirit, that I shall seek to discharge my obligations in this office, which I regard, as I have said, as the greatest privilege of my professional life to occupy.
Sandra Gidley. He said he'll cast aside all his political views.
Speaker-elect.
You know, not only does he have to cast aside...
It gives me the greatest pleasure to offer you the warmest congratulations on your election as the 157th Speaker of the House of Commons. You join a long and prestigious history of speakers who have all shared this moment in the election process. For now, however, you await confirmation by the monarch. The House will know that, having received royal approval, the longest-sitting Speaker held this great office for 33 years. Sir John Popham, however, was not so fortunate. He was the shortest-serving Speaker ever elected by this House. He might have been acceptable to his fellow members. He was not acceptable to the monarch. Let us hope that tonight you follow in the tradition of the longest-serving Speaker. In our election of the Speaker, the House is carrying out one of its most important responsibilities. The public are today looking to see whether we mean to change. And I believe it was clear in all the speeches by all the candidates today for the office of the new Speaker that we have taken an important step in that process of change. So may I also pay tribute, on behalf of all members of this House, to all those members who were prepared to put their names forward as candidates for this great office, and to the high quality of their speeches today. We should draw confidence from the knowledge that all of the 10 candidates are clearly driven by the desire to do what is best for this House, and by so doing what is best for the public and those we serve. And I thank them all. Let me also thank the Right Honourable Member for Swansea. The House, he has ensured today that the election under new procedures has been carried out and done with his customary charm, dignity and fairness. Mr. Speaker-elect, all of us in this House know that you bring great personal strengths and integrity and independence to the office to which we've elected you. Your deep and passionate concern for children's issues, especially those with learning difficulties, has been warmly welcomed right across this House. Your interest in helping those in greatest need, not only here in Britain, but for some of the poorest people on our planet, has been a mark of your distinction in this House. In your co-chairing of the all-party parliamentary group on Burma, you have demonstrated your commitment to democracy in every part of this world. You said that you had now cast aside all your past political views. Some of us thought you had done that some time ago. You are, of course, highly respected as a professional tennis coach. Forever now, you have moved to the position of umpire. Your commitment in your speech today was to change. You will bring a strength of character and purpose to our House, and all of us will wish you to succeed as you discharge your responsibilities in a spirit of fairness and responsibility. Now, this House has faced great moments of difficulty and great moments of challenge. Today, we have the opportunity to begin a new chapter with a new Speaker. Today, we have heard that every candidate for the office has understood that Parliament must reform. We have shown today also we can cross party divisions in our choice of Speaker, and I believe this country will also want us to work together in the same spirit as we set about reforming and changing our politics in this great House, and creating a new system of transparency and accountability that should take immediate effect. Undoubtedly, the road ahead will not be easy, but with your leadership and integrity, this House has begun the path to renewal. Mr. Speaker-elect, this House, I know, joins me in congratulating you on the highest of distinctions and thanks you for taking up the greatest of responsibilities in this House of Commons. Congratulations.
I thank the Prime Minister. The Leader of the Opposition. Thank you. Mr. Speaker-elect, may I join the Prime Minister in offering my congratulations and in wishing you well, not least in crossing that last hurdle that the Prime Minister referred to at the agreement of the monarch. I would like to thank the Father of the House for the way he conducted proceedings. I wasn't here for the last contested election for Speaker, but I gather this was a model of efficiency and good practice, so thank you for that. Mr. Speaker-elect, you know that on this side of the House, all colleagues share a view of the importance of the House of Commons, the importance of the role of Speaker, and the importance of the practices and procedures in this House. And you should know that in discharging your responsibilities, it goes without saying you have the support of these benches, but not just in your work as Speaker, but in the vital work of reforming and renewing this House that so badly needs to happen. Mr. Speaker-elect, I've read a lot about our own relationship. The thing that has never come out is the fact that, of course, briefly for a time, we were both together the first pair of the Lords and Commons tennis team. I'd also like to put on record a historical first that you have achieved, which is to be the first person of the Jewish faith to occupy the office of Speaker of the House of Commons, and it is a milestone that we should mark. I also noted, as all colleagues did, what you said about casting away your past political views. And I think on this side of the House we would say let's hope that includes all of them. I listened carefully, as honourable members did throughout the House, to an excellent debate this afternoon and a series of very strong and powerful speeches. I thought for myself there was something very powerful in what the honourable member for Gloucester said, when he said we need to demonstrate in this House of Commons that we get it, that we get the need for transparency, that we get the need for the reform of pay and allowances, and we get the need to understand and respond properly to the public's anger. We share a collective responsibility for what went wrong. We share a collective responsibility for putting it right. Your success will enable all of us to succeed in that. And on that note, I wish you well. I thank the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Nick Clegg.
I would also like to add my congratulations on your election, Mr. Speaker-elect, and thank, of course, the Father of the House for conducting the proceedings. The move to a secret ballot was the right one, and I congratulate him for inaugurating the process so successfully, though, judging by the cheer that went up when he said the third ballot would be accelerated, I think I'm not alone in hoping that next time we will be able to move at a less dignified pace. Mr. Speaker-elect, you have an enormous challenge and opportunity before you. Never in living memory has Parliament been the subject of so much anger and dismay from the people who send us here. The need for change is quite simply unprecedented. But you know, as we all do, that change does not come easily to this place where old habits die hard. So you must be different from every speaker who has ever come before you. No longer just another pillar of the establishment. We urge you to reinvent the role of speaker as a catalyst for radical change. Yeah. On your own, you cannot bring about that change, but you can become one of the prime architects of it. In your speech to us this afternoon, you rightly said, "I don't want to be something, I want to do something." I would urge you too to remember some of the words of the other candidates in today's elections, especially the words of the Honourable Member for Gloucester, who rightly said we should all be looking to change what he called settlement between Parliament and the people, and the words of the Honourable Member for Aldridge Brownhills, that this is not a moment for rhetoric, but a moment for action. To misquote the misquote from the Right Honourable Member for North West Hampshire, you must now show that you are in the office of Speaker, but not run by the office of Speaker. You will be at the centre of an institution which you yourself will wish to challenge. We know there are many things that everyone agrees on, so let us not delay, consult and analyse, but act quickly on reform under your guidance and leadership. Mr. Speaker, you have a mandate for change, not just from the votes you won today across the floor of the House of Commons, but from the people of Britain whose legitimate anger made this election happen. I urge you to use it.
Yeah. I'm grateful. Mr. Elfyn Clwyd. Thank you, Mr. Speaker-elect. May I congratulate you most warmly, personally, and on behalf of my friends and colleagues in Plaid Cymru and the Scottish National Party. Today, I think we saw Parliament at its best. 10 worthy candidates, 10 very good speeches, and one very worthy winner. I feel sure, Mr. Speaker, that you will be as mindful of the need to protect the interests of minority parties as all of the parties in this House. And without doing too much damage to myself in saying things like that, can I just finish by saying, warmly congratulating you and wishing you well in the momentous tasks you have ahead of you.
Mr. Mark Durkan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker-elect. Can I, on behalf of my colleagues, to join in thanking the Father of the House for the manner in which proceedings were conducted today. I also want to thank all of the candidates. The campaign that we witnessed, the debate and the ideas were very important in raising the sights of members of this House, and were very important reminders of our purposes and our proper priorities. And I believe that the contributions today went in some way to re-edifying the proceedings of this House. But what we have to do is now move forward to reforming the processes of this House. Mr. Speaker-elect, it is quite clear that you have received a mandate towards that end. All other candidates sought a mandate to that end. All party leaders have pledged themselves to that end. So let us move to decisive, authoritative reform now that means something to members of this House and that are actually credible to the public. Mr. Speaker-elect, I want to congratulate you on your election. It is important that you are the first member of your religion elected to this high office, and all of us have every confidence that you will honour every pledge that you have made.
Thank you. Reverend William McCrae.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker-elect. On behalf of my right honourable and honourable friends, I'd like to take this opportunity in congratulating you on your elevation to this very important office as Speaker of the House of Commons. I'd like to thank the Father of the House for the manner in which he carried out this election, and also to congratulate all the other candidates for the excellent speeches which they gave to this House today. Last week I thanked the former Speaker, Speaker Martin, for his defence of the rights of backbenchers and also minority parties. I trust, Mr. Speaker-elect, that you will continue in that vein. I will finally just simply trust that you will be granted great wisdom as you take this House of Commons through challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Kilfoyle.
Mr. Speaker-elect, you've heard from the Prime Minister, you've heard from the leaders of the various opposition parties, and it's notable that the Fourth Estate, of course, have gone away already. to decide why they got their predictions so wrong and whether, in fact, you've got a fine turn of calf which merits a certain kind of Victorian dress. Who knows? But I know that, reflecting on the honourable gentleman's, the previous speaker's comments, I know that you will consider every day when you sit in that chair that you do not owe the power of your position because of front benchers. You owe the power of your position because of the backbenchers in this place. And that I hope and pray and trust that what you will do will look out for the interests of those backbenchers, because as sure as night follows day, those backbenchers will look out for your interests too.
Thank you. Dr. Richard Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker-elect. May I add, as the senior independent elected member, my congratulations and welcome you sincerely. Your changes of mind have demonstrated your independence, and I do hope that this independence will continue in this very high post. So many congratulations to you, sir.
I think the Prime Minister will inform the House of the detailed arrangements for royal approbation. Prime Minister.
I have to signify to the House the pleasure of Her Majesty that this House should present the Speaker this day at 9:45 p.m. in the House of Peers for Her Majesty's royal approbation.
This House is suspended until 9:50 p.m.
Mr. Speaker. John Bercow, the 157th Speaker of the House of Commons, acknowledging that large sections of the public feel very angry about what has happened on expenses, suspends the House of Commons to wait the approbation, the royal approbation, at 9:45. At this very minute, a car is on its way to Buckingham Palace bearing the name of the Speaker-elect for the Queen's approval, and she will send back a warrant for the appointment of royal commissioners to give her consent. With me, Betty Boothroyd, Baroness Boothroyd, Speaker of the Commons 1992 to 2000. Your reaction?
Well, first of all, of course, I want to congratulate most warmly John Bercow. It's been he's done well to have succeeded, and he's got a very comfortable majority there. And he will want to do well. He'll want to do the job well, and I believe that he will. He is committed. It's a new era with a new Speaker, and I believe that he will tackle the job and he will be a success in it. Now, what he did say was that he has to cast aside his political views. I think he recognises, too, that he must cast aside his political party. He must leave his political party from this moment on, never to return to it. He must not ever go to his political caucus in his constituency again to give a report back. He is no longer a party individual.
A bit of joshing about which party he was in, because there are those who say he moved so far towards New Labour that he wasn't in the Tories, although he does have an 18,000 Tory majority in Buckingham.
That's right, but Daniel, I'm not as cheeky as you are on those things, actually. I'm not going to make any...
I was merely mentioning what David Cameron said.
But also, I think what I want to make mention of, too, is that we've had a very, very good debate today with a lot of strong, powerful speeches and a number of candidates who would have tackled the job and done it well too. So we are very rich in that respect in the Commons, and we have members who will put themselves forward and who want to do the job, want to clean it up, want to make some progress, want to make reform. And I pay tribute to all of those people who put their names forward today in that hope.
Betty Boothroyd, Baroness Boothroyd, Speaker of the House of Commons, a former version, the 155th Speaker of the House of Commons. Thank you for your view on the new Speaker-elect. I would just need to say, rejoin us at 9:45 for approbation. We'll be in the House of Lords with the Royal Commissioners. We'll be in the House of Commons. Black Rod will walk between the two houses. There'll be more hot hat doffing than you've ever had hot dinners. It's something to look forward to, 9:45 on BBC Parliament. But in the meantime, it's back to live coverage of the House of Lords, and you never guess what, it's the Policing and Crime Bill.
And entirely in line with reducing
unnecessary red tape.
For a nation called to undertake a great and responsible duty has found its interests mismanaged, its honour tarnished.
Good evening, this is Daniel Brittain at Westminster reporting on the final act of this 5-act extravaganza from the Palace of Westminster this afternoon. You're seeing pictures of the House of Lords where the final act of this drama takes place as the Royal Commissioners, appointed by Her Majesty the Queen, will give her approbation to the Commons' choice of their Speaker-elect, John Bercow. The Commons at the moment haven't reassembled, but the Lords are getting ready, and there'll be a fair degree of finery on show, the parliamentary robes of the Royal Commissioners, and the lead Royal Commissioner tonight. It'll be unique, the first time it has ever happened in history, as far as I can gather, and certainly from the historians in the House of Lords. Something unique will happen which will wait. The Lord Speaker, Baroness Hayman, takes her seat on the woolsack.
My Lords, I beg to acquaint the House that a commission has been issued under the Great Seal to several Lords therein named, authorising the said Lords to declare in the name and on behalf of Her Majesty Her Majesty's approbation of the choice of the Commons of Mr. the Right Honourable John Bercow to be their Speaker.
Baroness Royal, Leader of the House of Lords, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, advises the House that there is to be a Royal Commission, and the Lord Speaker's role this evening is limited to coming in and sitting on the woolsack and leaving the woolsack.
Now leaving.
Now leaving. She isn't a Royal Commissioner.
Lucky old her, eh?
You've done much longer this evening.
I have indeed.
Now, when this was going on with you, Betty, in 1992, this was all about to happen, you must have been in a state.
Of course I was, you know. You live on nervous energy at a time like this. But I think that my approbation was rather the next day.
Yes, it was, because your election was at the very beginning of a
right.
Parliament,
That's
immediately
right.
after a general election.
Yes.
So you had a bit of time to prepare yourself. What did you do
There
when
was hardly any time. I mean, I remember going out to a quiet dinner with a man friend and then going home and packing a couple of suitcases. I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I had to move out of my flat and get into Speaker's house. And a couple of suitcases. The next morning, very early, a government car came for me and took me into Speaker's house. And there I was, like a little stray waif with a couple of suitcases. Where do I go from here? Didn't know where the bedroom was, didn't know where the loo was, didn't know where anything was.
You have an enormous bed, the Speaker's bed, isn't it?
Oh, that was much too hard, actually. The one upstairs much more comfortable. But of course, whilst I had been in Speaker's house in the State Apartments, and I had been upstairs in Jack Weatherall's office, I did not know what the private apartments looked like or where they were. Of course, I didn't know anything about it. So I was really a stranger in there. Where's the bedroom and where's the bathroom and
You
where's
must have
the
been like
kitchen?
Little Red Riding
I
Hood.
really was, yes.
Coming.
Lost.
Really? And how long did it take you to find your way around?
Well, not long there, of course, but it was just very strange to...
The Royal Commissioners enter the Chamber of the House of Lords, led by the Lord Chancellor, Jack Straw MP, the first MP to chair a Royal Commission in the whole history of Parliament, going back 800 years. It's been at least since the 16th century since there was a Lord Chancellor in the House of Lords, but this is the first time an MP who's Lord Chancellor has given the Queen's approbation to the election of a Speaker by the House of Commons.
And a commoner is able to sit on the woolsack and do this?
Well, there are various arguments about this as to whether the woolsack is actually in the chamber.
That's right. It is not actually in the chamber. It is in the possession of the Crown, and therefore a Minister of the Crown can sit on the woolsack and do the job that Jack Straw is doing now.
Black Rod, Sir Freddie Viggers, new Black Rod,
Yes.
appointed on the 29th of April, taking over from his predecessor, Michael Wilcox, has been summoned by the Royal Commissioners, and he walks towards them bowing as he goes, to receive the Royal Commission's commands.
Let the Commons know that the Lords Commissioners desire their immediate attendance in this House to hear the Commission read.
Blackrod gets his orders to go to the House of Commons. 5 Royal Commissioners joining the Lord Chancellor. Lady Royal of Blaisdon, the Leader of the House of Lords. Lord Strathclyde, the Leader of the Opposition Peers. Lord McNally, Leader of the Liberal Democrats. And Baroness de Souza, convener of the crossbenchers. And you're a crossbencher now.
Yes, I am. I mean, it is the tradition that when a speaker, a former speaker, goes into the Lords, then you become a crossbencher.
Inspector Andy Richford of the Palace of Westminster Police, in front of Keith Phipps, the principal doorkeeper of the House of Lords, former warrant officer, 2nd class in the Coldstream Guards, and preceding Sir Freddie Viggers, KCB, CMG, MBE. Not just Blackrod, but also Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Lords. They have a job share, have had since 1971 in the House of Lords. He has powers of arrest anywhere in the House of Lords. And they're making their way now through Central Lobby towards the House of Commons, where, as on state opening, the door will be slammed in Blackrod's face. As the Queen isn't present, but there is a Royal Commission, Blackrod is wearing semi-state uniform this evening.
No frills.
No frills. No frills.
Just a plain white bow tie by the look of things, and he hasn't got any lace cuffs or a lace jabot. And no medals, of course. Who doesn't wear any medals?
And in his black rod, sovereign from 1904, he approaches the door of the House of Commons.
He's going to break it down.
Blackrod enters the House of Commons, accompanied by the Sergeant-at-Arms, Jill Pay.
It's a new one.
And they're startled to see a new Blackrod.
Mr. Speaker-elect, the Lords, authorised by virtue of Her Majesty's Commission to declare her royal approbation to the election of a Speaker, require the immediate attendance of this Honourable House in the House of Peers.
Freddie Viggers manages to get his way through the traditional barracking by Dennis Skinner on his first occasion. And now the Speaker-elect, John Bercow, joins Blackrod. And the mace is being carried sort of like a baby, or apport as it's called, because the House is still not properly constituted.
It's rather cradled by the arms of the Sergeant-at-Arms.
And on this one occasion, the mace is carried in this particular manner. Talking to our political correspondent who was in the gallery when John Bercow was declared the winner, he did say that a lot of Conservative MPs did not applaud him, and they didn't laugh at his jokes. A lot just sat on their hands. And I wonder, Betty Boothroyd, could that be a problem?
We didn't actually see that. I didn't see it on the screen, but I can well imagine that was the case, and it was rather sad if it did happen. And John Bercow will have a lot of work to do to bring round those members in his support. He's certainly got his work cut out, and he's going to have to bond with the Commons.
And also bond with the British people. He did return £6,500 of expenses after he had flipped his house, but he thought it was best to return £6,500. But he said that he must deal, as Speaker, with the anger of the British people on the whole expenses scandal. Jill Pay carrying the mace in this unusual way. They're followed by the Clerk of the House of Commons, Malcolm Jack, and the Speaker's Secretary, Angus Sinclair.
That's right.
behind them the Prime Minister. And they will enter the Lords, and we will see it. They will be greeted by a colossal amount of hat doffing as they bow to the Royal Commissioners. Commons bow to the Royal Commissioners, and the Royal Commissioners acknowledge the members of Parliament.
There's very little room in that box for all those people. Pretty crowded.
Very good hat doffing. In unison, the three of them in unison. Women do not doff their hats.
My lords, I have to acquaint your lordships that Her Majesty's faithful Commons, in obedience to the royal command, have, in the exercise of their undoubted rights and privileges, proceeded to the election of a Speaker, and that their choice has fallen on me. I therefore present myself at your lordship's bar and submit myself with all humility for Her Majesty's gracious approbation.
My lords and members of the House of Commons, it not being convenient to Her Majesty to be personally present here at this time, a commission has been issued under the Great Seal, commanding us and several other lords therein named to notify and declare Her Majesty's approbation of the choice of her faithful Commons, of Mr. John Bercow, to be their Speaker, which commission you shall now hear read.
Jack Straw we saw in the Commons earlier. He presumably voted for a Speaker candidate, and now we see him in the House of Lords.
Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of our other realms and territories, Queen, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith. To all to whom these presents shall come, greeting. Whereas we did lately for divers difficult and pressing affairs, concerning us, the state, and defence of our United Kingdom and the Church, ordain this our present Parliament to begin and be holden at our city of Westminster, the 11th day of May, in the 54th year of our reign, on which day our said Parliament was begun and holden, and is there now holden. And whereas we have been informed that the lower house of our said Parliament have lately made choice of our beloved and faithful John Simon Bercow, Esquire, in the room of our beloved and faithful Michael John Martin, Esquire, to be Speaker of the said lower house of our said Parliament, of which choice we are graciously pleased to approve and to allow and confirm the same. And for as much as for divers causes and considerations we cannot conveniently at this time be present in our royal person in our said Parliament, know ye that we, trusting in the fidelity and care of the most reverend Father in God and our faithful counsellor, Rowan Douglas, Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England and Metropolitan, our well-beloved and faithful counsellors, John Whittaker Straw, Chancellor of Great Britain, Thomas Galloway Dunlop de Roy de Bleaky, Lord Strathclyde, Tom, Lord McNally, Janet Anne, Baroness Royal of Blaisdon, Frances Gertrude Clare, Baroness de Souza, and other lords of our Privy Council, by the tenor of these presents do give and grant to them, or any three or more of them, full power in our name, to declare and notify our royal approbation of the choice of the said John Simon Bercow, to be Speaker of the said lower house of our said Parliament, and to allow and confirm the said John Simon Bercow to be Speaker of the said lower house, and to do all things in our said Parliament that may be necessary for declaring our said royal approbation, allowance, and confirmation of the said John Simon Bercow, to be Speaker of the said lower house of our said Parliament. In witness whereof we have caused these our letters to be made patent, witness ourself at Westminster, the 22nd day of June, in the 58th year of our reign, by the Queen herself, signed with her own hand.
Rhodri Waters, with the warrant from the Queen, signed this evening at Buckingham Palace.
Mr. Bercow, we have it in command from Her Majesty to declare Her Majesty's entire confidence in your talents, diligence and sufficiency to fulfil the important duties of the high office of Speaker of the House of Commons, to which you've been chosen by that House, and in obedience to the Commission, which has been read, and by virtue of the authority therein contained, we do declare Her Majesty's royal allowance and confirmation of you, sir, as Speaker of the House of Commons.
So he's now
My
the
Lords,
Speaker.
I submit myself with all humility and gratitude to Her Majesty's royal will and pleasure. I pray that if, in the discharge of my duties and in the maintenance of the rights and privileges of the Commons House of Parliament, I should inadvertently fall into error, it may be imputed to me alone and not to Her Majesty's faithful Commons.
The new Speaker has submitted himself to Her Majesty's gracious commands. And he's no longer the Speaker-elect, he is the Speaker of the House of Commons. Rather less unison hat-doffing as the Royal Commissioners say farewell to the MPs. Jack Straw has had a rather busy day. He sat in both Houses of Parliament, and earlier this evening he had dinner with a couple of constituents who had bid for him to have dinner with them as part of the Mayor of Blackburn's charitable fund. The Sergeant-at-Arms receives the mace from the doorkeeper, and now the mace is carried in its normal way back to the House of Commons. When you were in this position, Betty Boothroyd, you received the royal approbation. What went through your mind?
I was very emotional, I think, rather. I was very touched, I was very emotional. I looked at John Bercow, and he's a man of very great confidence and in command of himself. But there was a time when he looked down and he looked almost ready to shed a tear, as I was at the time.
Did you?
How I don't think I shed a tear, but I was ready. I had a lump in my throat, and I thought, I hope I can get some breath before I have to make any little speech here, yes.
And what were your feelings you became Speaker, but one of the highest offices of the land?
Hugely proud, enormously proud, and I intended to be so independent, and I believe that I was, because, Daniel, when you get the support of the House, which I had, and I'm saying this, I got the support of my entire party, the Labour Party, all the minority parties, and 70-odd Conservatives, and when you have that confidence, you have to do a good job. And I think Bercow will want to do a good job because of the confidence that's been placed in him.
Yes. Well, he's now about to take up his place in the House of Commons as Mr. Speaker.
And start work tomorrow.
Yes, they've got one more thing to do this evening, because nothing is ever quite as it seems in the Palace of Westminster, and he now has to tell the House what exactly has been going on in the House of Lords. Now, you might feel they do actually know
what's been going on exactly.
It reminds you of that Harold Wilson quote, doesn't it? I know what's going on. I'm going on.
I'd forgotten about that. A very good one, too.
The Sergeant-at-Arms will be placing the mace now properly on the table. The House of Commons is once more constituted with its Speaker. And the Speaker will inform the House what has happened and what we expect to happen after that is a motion from the government front bench asking Her Majesty the Queen to make Michael Martin appear.
Yeah, that's right, yes. That will come at the end.
And this happened to you when Michael Martin became Speaker?
Yes, it did. There was an emotion, I think, of gratitude too. It was very nice. But I wasn't there to hear it, but that is what happens, of course, to all those who have been speakers.
The Royal Commissioners, just so you know, have left the chamber of the House of Lords. In fact, I think the House of Lords has now retired for the evening. The Commons has got just a little bit more to go.
And still quite a good sprinkling of members there, you see, look in the Commons.
Mr. Speaker takes chair, this time now wearing his Speaker's
robe. That's right.
But he's not wearing the wig. You started all that.
Yes, but of course he could do. I mean, it isn't that I abolished the wig. I just chose not to wear it. And therefore it is up to any individual Speaker, if they so wish. They're perfectly at liberty to do so.
So we await the final words of today's 5-act drama.
Extravaganza, as you call it.
From the Speaker. John Bercow,
I have to
the
report that this House has been in the House of Lords, where Her Majesty has been pleased by Her Majesty's Commissioners to approve the choice made of myself for the office of Speaker. Yeah. My first duty to the House is to repeat my respectful acknowledgements and my grateful thanks for the great honour you have conferred upon me in placing me in the chair, and to renew the assurance of my entire devotion to the service of the House. The Prime Minister, the Leader of the House.
But you can't get it all right on the first day.
That an humble address be presented to Her Majesty, praying Her Majesty that she will be most graciously pleased to confer some signal mark of her royal favour upon the Right Honourable Michael J. Martin for his eminent services during the important period in which he has, with such distinguished ability and dignity, presided in the chair of the House, and assuring Her Majesty that whatever expense Her Majesty shall think fit to be incurred upon that account, this House will make good the same.
The question is that an humble address be presented to Her Majesty, praying Her Majesty that she will be most graciously pleased to confer some signal mark of her royal favour upon the Right Honourable Mr. Michael J. Martin for his eminent services during the important period in which he presided with such distinguished ability and dignity in the chair of this House. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Michael Martin will be joining you in the House of Lords.
The Leader of the House.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
That's the easy bit.
So he said his first order. Jill Pay, the Sergeant-at-Arms, approaches the table to take away the mace. The House has adjourned for the evening, and that brings us to the end of our coverage of the election of the 157th Speaker of the House of Commons. Huge thanks to my special guest, Baroness Boothroyd, Betty Boothroyd, and we now join back onto BBC Parliament for Lord's questions from earlier today.